In this video, I'm going to figure out which middle evolution starter is better for a solo challenge of Pokemon Yellow. These are the rules for the playthroughs, you can find them in the description. Okay, so this is kind of part 3 of an ongoing series. A long time ago, I did runs with the full evolutionary lines, starting as the first stages, evolving throughout the playthroughs, and then completing the games as the final forms. After that, I did the initial stages last year in December, and this year we're going to do the middle stages. Obviously, next year is the last year of my Pokemon Yellow series. I'm going to complete the tier list then and rank their final forms, which I am sure are going to get exceptional times. And I do mean all of them, even Charizard. I have really had a bias against fire types in the solo challenge format. I don't play particularly well with them, but I do think that Charizard is the best fire type in Generation 1. And so I think there might still be a hope for the fire type to gain one spot in the S tier. That said, today we're dealing with middle evolutions, and I don't think they're going to be that good. Right now in the tier list, I have 105 Pokemon out of 151 ranked. Currently, there are only 5 fire types that have not been entered into this list: Charizard, Charmeleon, Vulpix, Growlithe, and Ponyta. Of course, the first stage fire types are not going to do well. I expect them to fall somewhere in the D to F tier, and today with the starters, I think they're going to get results somewhere between the A and D tier. D tier in the worst case scenario, maybe with Charmeleon, although that would rank it behind Bulbasaur, and in the same tier as Charmander, which I think is a little bit unlikely. So I think it's far more likely that we're going to be looking at results somewhere between the C and A tier. And I do think it's possible for these Pokemon to get A tier finishes because they're all quite fantastic. The medium slow growth rate is by far the best solo challenge growth rate in the game, and all starters have it. For base stats, Ivysaur has 60 HP and speed, 62 attack, 63 defense, and 80 special, which is perfect because all grass type moves in Generation 1 are special. Although, when we look at Ivysaur's move pool, we start to realize that it's not really going to be a special attacker. It starts with Tackle, Growl, and Leech Seed, so only physical moves. At level 13 it gets Vine Whip, but this move strangely only has 10 PP, even though it has 35 base power. To me, it always seems like they mixed up Vine Whip's PP with Absorb's PP. Somehow the two got shuffled around in development. I don't know, it doesn't make any sense for this move to only have 10 PP and no secondary effect, with only 35 base power. Beyond that, Ivysaur gets Poison Powder, Razor Leaf at level 30, which is a high critical hit rate move. We'll talk about it later. Growth at level 38, which raises special by 1 stage. This is a unified stat in Generation 1, so this move is very good. At level 46, it gets my favorite move in the game, Sleep Powder, and then at 54, Solar Beam, but there's no Sunny Day in Generation 1. This is where everything changes though, because through TM and HM, Ivysaur gets access to Swords Dance and Body Slam. I don't really know if I should read off the other moves, because once you know that it has those two, you can be pretty sure that it's going to be utilizing them together with Sleep Powder. I think in Generation 1 solo challenges, Swords Dance is the second best move in the game, only being eclipsed by Amnesia, which is by far the best move. Okay, so what competition does Ivysaur have to go up against? Well, Charmeleon is also quite good. 58 HP and defense, 64 attack, 80 speed, and 65 special. In terms of solo running, these are not really the stats you want. Its higher speed is slightly advantageous, giving it a 15.63% chance to crit, and it will always get critical hits whenever it uses Slash. That said, the fact that it doesn't have 80 in one of its attacking stats, I think is going to hold it back. Although the fire type is actually fantastic in the early game of Generation 1. I know I've been really hard on these Pokemon, but in the early game, it is so much better of a type when compared with the grass or the poison type. In terms of move pool, Charmeleon starts with Scratch, Growl, and Ember, a far better starting set when compared with Ivysaur. Then through level up, it gets Leer, Rage, Slash at level 33, and Flamethrower at level 42. Fire Spin at level 56. It seems like the developers thought this was the best fire type move, but it's really not. I think it might be the worst fire type move in Generation 1. It's absolutely trash. There are some niche uses of it for solo challenges, but I'll mention those in a later video, likely not this one. Flamethrower is just going to be the go-to fire type move. Through TM and HM, it also has a fantastic set. Probably better than Ivysaur. Mega Punch, Swords Dance, Mega Kick. Yes, this is a notable move for Charmeleon. Body Slam, the 3 fighting type moves. Dragon Rage. I'm never going to buy this, it's from the Game Corner. Dig, which is going to be key for this run. And finally, Fire Blast. This set includes Swords Dance, and it also has a ton of type diversity. Plus, in Generation 1, Dig has the same base power as Earthquake, so there's no loss there. I think on paper, if we compare base stats, Ivysaur wins out. But if we compare move pools, Charmeleon definitely comes out with an advantage. And finally, if we compare typings, especially for the early game, Charmeleon has an advantage, but in the late game, Ivysaur is going to be far better. After all, everyone, please remember that Lance has a Gyarados that has Hydro Pump, and he has good AI, so he's always going to be choosing the water type move. And speaking of water types, let's talk about Wartortle. For base stats, it has 59 HP, 63 attack, 80 defense, 58 speed, and 65 special. Of the three, I would say this is the worst stat spread, although its lower base speed will have some advantages later into the playthrough, which I'll talk about. For a move pool, it starts with Tackle, Tail Whip, and Bubble. It's not as bad as Ivysaur's Leech Seed, but it's definitely no Ember. Only 20 base power, and I guess it has a chance to lower speed, but Wartortle isn't that slow. Then through level up, it gets Water Gun at 15, Bite at 24. This is a normal type move in Generation 1. Withdraw at 31, so it can trigger the badge boost, and that is going to be important. Skull Bash at level 39. This move does not increase defense on the turn it charges up in Generation 1 only. And then finally Hydro Pump at level 47. Through TM and HM, Wartortle gets a set that's very similar to Charmeleon's. Mega Punch, Mega Kick, Body Slam, then water type moves, Bubble Beam, Water Gun, and Surf. Also, these moves are usually complemented with ice type moves, so Ice Beam and Blizzard. Then it gets the 3 fighting type moves as well as Dig. There is one omission here, which is unfortunate, and that is Wartortle is the only starter that does not have access to Swords Dance. And this is why Withdraw is going to be key for this playthrough. It's the only way for it to set up its stats. Okay, with the introductions out of the way, we are going to start with Pokedex order today, so Ivysaur is first up. Do note, this is not the order I played these playthroughs in. I always play the underdog last, so that it has the benefit of player experience. In this case, my play order was Ivysaur, Wartortle, and then Charmeleon. I personally went into this predicting that Ivysaur was going to be the fastest, just because Sleep Powder is really broken in Generation 1. Just look at what Bulbapedia has to say about this status condition in the first generation. Sleep lasts 1 to 7 turns. This counter is not reset upon switching out. A Pokemon cannot move on the turn it wakes up, and that is key because if the sleep inducer is moving first, then it can just put the opponent back to sleep before it ever gets a chance to attack. Also, the fact that this status can last 7 turns is really broken, and Ivysaur only needs 3 turns to set up with Swords Dance. However, in order to unlock its full potential, I have to first get out of the early game, and this is the slowest part of Ivysaur's run. In the early game, Ivysaur does not stack up well against the opponent Pokemon. It has to use Tackle, utilizing its lower attacking stat. All of the Pokemon in this section of the game are either Bug, Flying, or Poison types. There are some small exceptions to that, but mostly that's true, meaning when I get Vine Whip, most of the Pokemon are going to resist my attacks, so I just want to use Tackle anyway. Also, Leech Seed as a third move is just really not very nice, although it will have utility in my follow-up playthroughs. Today with Ivysaur in the early game, I decided to play a very conservative approach. This is my first playthrough after all. I know that it can beat Brock on minimum battles, but I tested around with that before doing this run, and it's not really that likely. So what I wanted to demonstrate in this first playthrough is the very consistent and safe way to play the early game, although it is slow. Fight pretty much every trainer, fight pretty much every wild Pokemon you come across, battle the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym. All of this will level Ivysaur up to level 13 where it gets Vine Whip, and now it can deal 4 times damage to both of Brock's rock ground types. Okay, so Geodude, I didn't even heal for this fight. I have 14 hit points remaining. I know that I'm going to win. It's going to be a series of 2 1-hits, and Ivysaur's speed is 25, so I'm going to be moving first against the Onix. As I knew what happened, Vine Whip one-shots, so that's an easy but slow first badge for Ivysaur. It gets a first split of 5 minutes and 56 seconds. Okay, let's talk about ironic game design. When you look at the starters and how they stack up against the early gym leaders in the game, it becomes quite clear which one is easy mode, which one is medium mode, and which one is hard mode. Ivysaur is technically super effective against both Brock, Misty, then it resists Surge's attacks, and it's neutral against Erica. The first gym leader in the game that it is supposed to be weak to is Koga, but they also gave it the secondary type of Poison, so it technically only takes neutral damage from him. So you have to get all the way to Sabrina or Blaine before it starts taking super effective damage from its opponents. Ivysaur is supposed to be easy mode. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum is Charmeleon. It's a fire type. It should be weak to Brock's rock and ground types. It is weak to Misty's water types, then it's neutral against Surge and becomes super effective once it reaches Erica. So it's supposed to be slower in the early game, but faster in the later stages of the game. Although this couldn't be further from how these Pokemon actually play in the game. As I've made a case for before, Ivysaur is slow in the early game. It just doesn't have a good typing that goes up against all of the random trainers, and having only Leech Seed really handicaps it going into Brock. And this is where we need to go back in time and have a little bit of nostalgia from when I was a kid, and statistically probably also when you were a kid. Back in the late 90s, when you chose Charmander as your starter and then you made it to Brock, and you used Ember against his Pokemon, what conclusion did you come up with? I couldn't read when I was playing these games, so I looked at the damage that Ember did in comparison with another move like Scratch, and I thought, Ember is super effective here. Look at how much damage it does. This is the move that you want to use whenever you go up against a rock and ground type. You know what it took for me to realize that fire type moves are not super effective against rock ground types? Well, it took the ability to read, but it also took later generations introducing rock types that had decent special defense stats. I'm thinking of you, Nosepass, and I really don't want to be thinking of you. This Pokemon is so awful, both in design and in how it solo ran Emerald earlier this year. Okay, this is all the long-winded way of saying that Charmeleon is going to have no problems against Brock. Plus, Ember gives it the ability to train very quickly in the forest to level up. So even if I do the same amount of training as Ivysaur and try to get to level 13, Charmeleon just pulls it off way faster, and that's exactly what I do. I'm level 13 by the time I'm facing Brock, and look at how much damage Ember is doing to the Geodude. It only takes 4 hits to knock it out. Onix is next, of course I am faster than it, and I want to mention one secondary side effect here, which is the fact that Ember can burn. If that happens, even if Brock uses one of his full heals on Onix, the attack stat will not be recovered. So essentially, burn permanently cuts his attacking stats, making his Pokemon even more useless. Now, to set up my follow-up runs, I am confident that both of these starters can beat Brock faster. That said, even doing the more conservative approach with both of them, Charmeleon dramatically outperforms Ivysaur. It gets a first split of 4 minutes and 20 seconds. By the way, just pause here quickly. Let's just zoom in on Charmeleon's back sprite. This one is actually atrocious. It hurts me every time I look at it. It does not look like a cool, sleek lizard. He looks like, I don't know, like chubby and kind of made out of like Play-Doh or something. Definitely one of the worst back sprites in Generation 1, although we haven't got to Golduck yet. That one is definitely going to take the cake as the worst back sprite of them all. Okay, Wartortle time. Let's just look at the battle against the Eevee in the lab. This is where I think you can see the weakness that Wartortle has in the early game. While it does know the move Bubble, Eevee's special stat is higher than its defense stat, so Tackle will do more damage here. And even though Wartortle has good defensive stats, the Eevee can use Tail Whip and then spam Tackle. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually end up losing the intro battle. I haven't discussed the rivals team up until now, but this is a great opportunity for me to do that. In Pokemon Yellow, the rival selects his final evolution based on the outcome of the first 2 battles against him. Just in case you don't know, these 2 battles are 1 in the lab and number 2 on Route 22, which is an optional battle. If you lose in the lab, he will always choose Vaporeon. If you win in the lab and skip Route 22, he will choose Flareon. If you lose on Route 22, it doesn't count towards anything. It'll just be a skip if you don't defeat him there, or a win if you do defeat him there. In the scenario where you win in the lab and you skip Route 22, he chooses Flareon, and if you win in both locations, then he chooses Jolteon. I have seen some misinformation floating around about how this mechanic works online, so this is exactly how it works. So because of the outcome of the first battle, I am going to be facing the Vaporeon team with Wartortle. If this makes you a little bit frustrated thinking this is a solo challenge, you should be going up against the team that is most difficult for your Pokemon to defeat, well, then you win today because water types like to face the Jolteon team. It is by far the easiest one for them to take on, and that is exclusively because the champion's Magneton is an absolute menace. Okay, so after losing the first battle, I was not feeling great about this run. In the forest also, Wartortle is kind of slow at knocking out the bug-type Pokemon. While I am neutral against them, they have decent special stats because eventually the Caterpie line evolves into Butterfree. And also, have I mentioned it? Bubble is not very powerful. This move is so frustrating to use. Anyway, I defeat the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym, level up to 11, and I figured this was good enough. I'm not going to do as much training as I did with the other 2. Now, Bubble is so bad, I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to get one-shots on the Geodude and the Onix, but Wartortle does pull it off. So even though it lost the first battle and had a slower forest, the fact that it could cut training and then just beat Brock easily anyways gives it the best first split. 4 minutes and 8 seconds. Now over the next section of the game, Ivysaur is going to struggle to gain momentum, but Wartortle on the other hand is going to start gaining momentum very quickly. On Route 3 it levels up to 15 where it gets Water Gun, a far better same type attack bonus move, and then inside of Mount Moon I pick up Mega Punch, which is a far better alternative to Tackle. Also the training inside of the cave is quite quick, like for example this hiker, I can knock out all of his rock ground types in one hit from either Bubble or Water Gun. As of late, I haven't been super rigorous talking about the fossil nerd or the fossil that I pick in these videos. I get the Dome Fossil. I always take the Dome Fossil. I promised after Kabutops won against Omastar that I would never pick the Helix Fossil again. So I've still held true to that. Even as I'm trying to get the best times with all of these Pokemon, I still always pick the Dome Fossil. Okay, so Jesse and James. This fight actually ends up pretty close for Wartortle. I get poisoned by the Ekans. I two-shot. Then I'm going to two-shot the Meowth. It goes for Bite, getting a critical hit, bringing me down to 18 hit points. Now in Generation 1, on the turn that you knock an opposing Pokemon out, you do not take poison damage. So as long as I'm KOing, I'm not taking much, but it's going to take 3 hits to knock the Coughing out. It does chip damage along with the status condition, and I end up at only 3 hit points by the time Wartortle pulls through with a victory. Unlike when I was a kid, I do buy antidotes in these playthroughs, so I'm going to make it to Cerulean City. On the long walk there, I have to decide, do I want to take on the rival on Nugget Bridge or Misty first? With Pokemon that are special attackers, fighting the rival right away makes sense. But with water types, facing Misty first makes more sense because you can get the TM for Bubble Beam, which will accelerate my progress over the next section of the game. Now I don't have great moves against Misty right now. She has a propensity of using X-Defend and Harden with the Starmie. To get around those stat boosting moves, I can teach Wartortle the TM that I got from Brock. Bide. Usually this move is completely trash, but this is one scenario where it's very helpful. Okay, let's face Misty. I'm going to draw your attention to the mistakes I'm making during this battle. First of all, using Bite against the Staryu rarely makes sense because then you take a lot of damage before the Starmie comes in. What I should be doing here is instead using Mega Punch. After all, the Staryu does not have Harden, and Misty only has 1 X-Defend per Pokemon, so it can't go above +1 defense. In this scenario, I make it to the Starmie, but I have less than half health. Luckily, Misty uses X-Defend on the turn that I use Bide because Wartortle is slower. But then the Starmie uses Harden, it goes for Tackle after that, and the energy that Wartortle unleashes is less than inspiring. I continue to get fairly unlucky, having the Starmie not attack into me, instead choosing moves like Harden and then 1 Tackle every time I use Bide. So I get brought to low health, I have to choose Mega Punch, but it's not doing enough damage and Wartortle faints. This is the first reset of the video. Thing is, I'm eventually going to win here. I can spam Mega Punch on the Staryu, correcting my strategy, and then for the Starmie, I go for Bide right away, and it doesn't attack into it on the first 2 turns, but then it gets a critical hit with Tackle, so I reflect a ton of damage back to it. After that, it consistently attacks, I bring it down to red health, and then use Mega Punch to knock out Misty's ace. Wartortle again just barely pulls through with a win, but now I have access to Bubble Beam. The rivals team just falls apart to this powerful move. I was hoping to one-shot the Spearow, but I don't, but after that I one-shot both the Sandshrew and the Rattata and 2-hit the Eevee. I usually don't like to go through damage ranges in the first playthroughs, but I want to use one here to emphasize a fact about this run. So how does Bubble Beam speed up my progress? Well, it gives me more one-hits than I would otherwise have using a move like Water Gun or Mega Punch. This youngster is a great example. If you look at my damage ranges, Bubble Beam has a one-hit on all 3 of his Pokemon. Water Gun is able to one-hit the first Rattata, but Mega Punch would have to be used to get good damage ranges against the Ekans and the Zubat. But Mega Punch has a 15% chance to miss every time you use it. This would expose Wartortle to some annoyances like getting wrapped by the Ekans, which would waste a lot of time, potentially getting poisoned where I'd have to use an antidote after the battle, or I could be hit by the Zubat's Supersonic, which in the worst case scenarios can cause resets or blackouts. Having Bubble Beam makes this fight trivial. Another example of how helpful it is fighting Misty first is against this guy who has Mankey. Both Mega Punch and Water Gun are going to 2-shot, whereas Bubble Beam has a 59.1% chance to 1-hit. Less frames in battle means less time in the playthrough, and that's my whole goal here on the channel. Beating these games as fast as possible with every species. After completing Nugget Bridge and Route 25, I have to face this lass. I call her the Oddish lass because she has 2 Oddish. Luckily, Wartortle has Mega Punch, so even though it's a water type, it doesn't struggle with these grass types. Well, unless it misses, Mega Punch is inconsistent, and I'm really glad that I'm going to be able to replace this move very soon. After defeating the Rocket Bystander, I get the TM for Dig. I add it to Wartortle's set in the place of Water Gun, and then on the SSN, I upgrade Mega Punch to Body Slam. My new set is absolutely fantastic here against the rival, he causes no issues, but coming up next is Lieutenant Surge, the worst gym leader in all of Kanto, but of the 3 starters, Wartortle is the most worried about him. Occasionally, the Raichu is known for emitting stray thunderbolts. Okay, Lieutenant Surge, please don't ruin my day. Raichu comes out, and right away it goes for Thunderbolt. It's faster than Wartortle, and it also gets a critical hit. That makes it a one-shot. Alright, I guess second reset to Lieutenant Surge, that's pretty annoying. In the next battle, though, we get to see that Raichu does not have good AI. Instead, it just uses Mega Punch and allows Wartortle to go for Dig. The super effective ground move does massive damage, and without a critical hit, it one-shots Surge's only Pokemon. The Water-type middle evolution gets a third split of 17 minutes and 23 seconds. Okay, back to Ivysaur. Let's watch it struggle against a random bug catcher on Route 3. Now, I don't mean struggle in the sense that it's going to lose, but it just takes time to knock out these Pokemon. Vine Whip is almost out of PP. I'm using Tackle, which is inconsistent, only having 95% accuracy, and in general, Ivysaur is just not moving quickly throughout the routes of the early game. It can knock out the Hiker's Pokemon in Mount Moon quickly for some extra experience, but this is really the only trainer that goes by quickly. At the end of the cave, I have to face the Super Nerd who has 2 poison types. This fight is, again, just slow. I'm not going to lose here. If things go badly, I can use Leech Seed to gain back some health or Growl to lower their attacking stats, and as a poison type, I can't be poisoned, so there's no threat of the status condition. Also, Jesse and James have 2 poison types. This is another really slow battle for Ivysaur. Luckily, it's going to speed up against Misty. Vine Whip 2-shots the Staryu, Starmie comes in next, and it can't really do anything to me. Tackle is its best move, and unless it crits on every single turn, I just don't think it has a chance. Vine Whip 3 shots, and that's that. Okay, back to the slog because the rival has a flying type, Spearow. It takes 3 hits with Tackle to knock it out, and it potentially could lower my attack stat with Growl, making the rest of the fight awful. Now, Vine Whip is able to one-hit both the Sandshrew and the Rattata, so there's a little bit of speed there, but it takes 3 turns to knock the Eevee out. Now, if you click on any of my videos, you want a long experience. I've just accepted that, so I'm not going to apologize for going into extra details about pretty much every trainer on Nugget Bridge using Ivysaur. I can't believe I have to talk about all these people. The first person has bug types, so I have to use Tackle against him. Also, Vine Whip's PP is so low that I'm not going to have very many of these moves throughout the entire route, and that's probably going to force Ivysaur back to the Pokemon Center to heal in order to progress, wasting even more time. The second person on Nugget Bridge is this Lass, who has a Pidgey. It's a flying type, so I have to knock it out using Tackle. That exposes me to Sand Attack, lowering my accuracy, making Tackle that was already inconsistent even more inconsistent. And following the Pidgey is a Nidoran female, a poison type, which takes forever to knock out using Vine Whip or Tackle. These fights are put together just to make Ivysaur go slowly. Okay, but we haven't seen the worst of it yet, because the next trainer has a Zubat. Now, I will have you know, in Generation 1, early game Zubats are terrifying when you're using a grass poison type. In this game, bug type moves deal super effective damage to grass and poison types, so Leech Life does 4 times damage. And Zubat also has Supersonic, so there's the potential here to get trapped by confusion and then knocked out very quickly with the bug type move. Too bad Zubat is a poison flying type and I have to knock it out using Tackle. It's inconsistent already and it only does half damage. Luckily for me, while Supersonic does hit, I don't damage myself in confusion and Leech Life never happens. That said, you would think I would be through it all now, but I'm not. The next Lass has the same team as the prior one, although these Pokemon are higher levels, so they take longer to knock out. Look at how many shots this Nidoran takes before it goes down. Okay, finally the Mankey guy. He's actually kind of easy, only 2 Vine Whips to knock his single Pokemon out. But after that, I have to face the Rocket who has Ekans and Zubat. This one also has the bug type move. Luckily, he doesn't have good AI, so he has no idea what he's doing, and he can also choose Bite now, and that's actually a small advantage for Ivysaur, so things are slowly relaxing and getting a little bit easier. But by the end of Route 25, I still have to fight this Lass and use Tackle against her team. This move has really worn out its welcome. And things don't get better for Ivysaur because the Rocket Bystander has Drowsy, it knows Hypnosis and Confusion. Hypnosis is a sleep-inducing evasion-inducing move, and as I mentioned before, these are broken in Generation 1. And then Confusion is super effective against my poison type. I think saving in front of him makes a lot of sense. I do get put to sleep and hit by Confusion, but luckily Ivysaur wakes up and pulls through with a win. So, can I stop complaining about all the random trainers? No, I can't, because Sandy is next. She has 3 Pidgeys, all of them have Sand Attack, and Ivysaur is not going to be able to one-hit them because it has to use Tackle. I have been emphasizing all of these trainers because I really want you to know that at any of these moments, Ivysaur can get a reset, and Sandy is the first place where it happens. Luckily, I only have 1 reset before I defeat her on my next attempt. But I am not through the ringer yet because the next junior trainer on the route has a Spearow. It's a flying type, it knows Peck, it can deal super effective damage, and the Raticate is sometimes scary when it uses Hyper Fang, especially if it gets a critical hit. No problems here for Ivysaur in this run though, so I head onto the SSN, and now it's finally gonna get some other options in terms of damage dealing moves. To play safe, I grab Rest, and then I use 2 rare candies to go up from level 28 to level 30. This allows Ivysaur to learn Razor Leaf in the place of Leech Seed. This move has a high critical hit rate. Now, Ivysaur's base 60 speed will not guarantee critical hits, but it's going to make them very likely. To figure out how likely they are, the formula is really simple. Divide the base speed of the Pokemon by 64. So every time Ivysaur uses Razor Leaf, it has a 93.75% chance to crit the opposing Pokemon. Critical hits in Generation 1 don't do a flat 2 times multiplier, they're instead based on level, and it's roughly between 1.8 and 1.9. Okay, I defeat the youngster in this room. He has a poison type, and even though Razor Leaf gets a critical hit, I don't one-shot. But the days of this frustration are over because now I have the TM for Body Slam, and at long last a reliable neutral damage move. Ivysaur's moveset crushes the rival, and then against Surge, I don't really have to worry. I take not very effective damage from Thunderbolt, his most powerful move, so unless the Raichu is critting a lot with Mega Kick, I should be fine. But Surge is really bad. He just uses an X speed, then I use Body Slam, get a critical hit, inflict paralysis, so I'm faster anyway, and Raichu goes down on the second turn without ever attacking. Ivysaur gets a third split of 20 minutes and 8 seconds. So you can see here that Ivysaur is slower than Wartortle in this section of the game. Wartortle had Bubble Beam, it was fast against random trainers. Ivysaur, on the other hand, was not. And I think after all of that complaining, we are now going to be really impressed with Charmeleon, because it does one better than Wartortle over the next section of the game, with one significant downside, and that's Misty. We're going to talk about her in a little bit. Immediately on Route 3, you can see just how dominant Charmeleon is here because it one-shots all of the bugs with Ember. I'm also going into these fights at low health because I don't need to heal. I'm not really worried about these Pokemon, although Youngster Ben gets a little bit scary. I have red health by the end of the battle. Inside Mount Moon, I get access to Mega Punch, which I put in the place of Growl, and Charmeleon stomps the final battles in the cave. Growl from the Meowth can't lower my primary attacking stat because I'm using Ember to defeat all of these Pokemon. Also, just look at the damage ranges. I'm two-shotting everything, so this is quick. It would make absolutely no sense to fight Misty next because there's no advantage to doing things in that order. So instead I'm going to fight the rival. And since Charmeleon has special damage in the form of Ember, his team is going to be quite easy with one exception. The fact that the Sandshrew will survive one hit and have a chance of using Sand Attack. If this happens, things could fall apart, but even that scenario is pretty unlikely when I'm doing massive damage to all of his remaining team members. Just to contrast Ivysaur, let's go through the trainers on Nugget Bridge. The Bug Catcher at the beginning, I one-shot both of his Pokemon with Ember. Then Mega Punch one-shots the Pidgey on the Lass's team, and Ember can two-shot the Nidoran. I don't have a type disadvantage to Zubat, so I don't have to be worried about it. Plus, Charmeleon just one-shots with Mega Punch. You obviously get the point, so let's skip ahead. Outside of Cerulean City, after defeating the Rocket, I get the TM for Dig, which Charmeleon can learn. And here we need to direct our eyes to the bottom left of the screen. Look at my speed stat. It is exactly 56, which is the same as Misty's Starmie. So I can teach Dig now in the place of Leer, and then use one rare candy to bring Charmeleon up to level 26 so that it outspeeds both of Misty's Pokemon. What this means is the fire type isn't going to have to backtrack from Vermilion City after doing the SSN for additional levels. This is an advantage for it in terms of time once again. And if you look at the clock, things are going very well so far. So what are the downsides in the Misty fight? Well, she can get critical hits with water type moves, and she does have good AI, so she's always going to be spamming Water Gun or Bubble Beam. The only reason she would do something else is if she replaces her move with an X defend. And I don't want that to happen because that'll reduce the damage that Dig deals. It doesn't on the Staryu, and I knock it out in a single hit. Starmie's next, it goes for Bubble Beam while I'm underground. Dig does about half, then it uses Water Gun, which does a third. My next Dig does not knock out, but Misty uses an X defend instead of attacking. So I am able to knock out her ace using Scratch and take a victory on my first attempt. Okay, I put a little poem for all of you together to narrate the next section of the game. Rest for safety, body slam for damage, the rival is easy, and so is Surge. Hopefully you like my poetry. Anyways, Charmeleon gets a split after Surge of 15 minutes and 51 seconds. By far in the early game, it is the fastest middle stage starter. And the same is true with Charmander in the first stages, and I'm sure the same will be true for the final evolutions when we get there next year. Charmeleon continues to crush random trainers. The Rapping Lass, the guy with Slowpoke inside of the tunnel. He seems like he might be problematic, but the Slowpoke doesn't have any water type moves, and Cubone is a 2-shot using Ember. The status condition junior trainer starts teaching me something about Charmeleon. By this point in the game, it is better to be using Dig against grass poison types than it is to use Ember. And for a lot of fire types in yellow version, that's the curse that they face throughout the entire game, because the only fire type move they really get access to outside of Ember is Fire Blast. But with Charmeleon, that's not the case. It's going to get Flamethrower at level 42. The self-destructing hiker is not an issue because they have access to Dig. This move speeds up the battle because sometimes he self-destructs when you're underground and then you knock out his next Pokemon. Beyond that, I head into Celadon City, clear out the hideout, grabbing myself one extra rare candy, which is going to be helpful for the late game, because I am so scared for Lance's Gyarados when using Charmeleon. I'm going to have to rely on some luck there, but I would like to have a damage range to either 3-shot or 2-shot the Gyarados, making it much more consistent. I did work a little bit against this goal buying Carbos in the department store. I'm sure these aren't necessary for Charmeleon. They're usually the vitamin I buy in first playthroughs, but I think Protein would have been far better. The rival in Pokemon Tower is just kind of a pushover, nothing to worry about here. Then Agatha Jr. is easy, as well as all of the Ghastly in Pokemon Tower because Dig's super effective. Cycling Road, I fight optional trainers for experience. I complete the Safari Zone, which doesn't bring many good benefits to Charmeleon, and then I dig back to Celadon City, and I think it makes sense to face Erica now. Tangela is first, and I have Ember, but I will note here that I now also have Slash. When you look at the damage ranges, Slash does do more damage when compared with Ember, so even though it's super effective, it just makes more sense to use the normal type move. This allows me to 2-shot all of her Pokemon, and because she has good AI and type effectiveness, she never chooses any of her grass type moves, meaning both the Weepinbell and Gloom are locked into using Acid, which is just not very good. I'm going to mention one thing here that people have talked about in these challenges, so notice that my Charmeleon levels up to 38. Then it has the animation where it says, "What? Char is evolving," and I have to press B to cancel this animation. A frequently asked question is, how many times do I fail to press B here? And the answer is never. I'm actually so good at pressing B during this screen that sometimes when I want to evolve in casual playthroughs, I accidentally stop the Pokemon from evolving. Anyways, I'm drawing your attention to this for a specific reason that pertains to the times these Pokemon are going to get in solo challenges. The fact that they have to press B to get out of this evolutionary screen is a disadvantage when compared with a Pokemon like, say, Porygon, which doesn't evolve. Many people have said that I should mod this out of these playthroughs, but I personally think that that goes against the spirit of the challenges, because Ivysaur evolves at level 32 into Venusaur, so it is going to have to press B on this screen 4 more times when compared with both Wartortle and Charmeleon, giving these two starters an advantage over the grass type. Level of evolution is one of the mechanics in the game, and I think if it gives a specific species an advantage, then it should. Modding this out would remove that advantage and make things a little bit more unfair on a Pokemon like Charmeleon, which is already gonna struggle in this challenge. Believe me, it seems so dominant right now, but like they say in one of the songs I grew up listening to, it's all downhill from here. Now, this might surprise you, because if I go to Sylph next, I can grab the TM for Swords Dance. Before I do that though, I complete extensive training. Conveniently, when I'm fighting the Hypno Sandwich, who has great art, I level up to 42 and learn Flamethrower in the place of Ember. Now, I did the training before grabbing Swords Dance so that I could use moves like Slash and Body Slam for their PP during this section of the game. Now, with all of that concluded, I'm going to grab Swords Dance and teach it in the place of Slash. The reason is in Generation 1, critical hits bypass all stat changes, even beneficial ones. So if I set up with Swords Dance and then crit with Slash, which is a guarantee, I'm going to do less damage. So Body Slam and Dig are the better go-to physical moves for Charmeleon, and Flamethrower is essentially just here whenever I need it for type effectiveness. And that's immediately relevant against the rival in Sylph. I didn't want to set up on the Sandslash because he can use Sand land attack, so instead I use Flamethrower and knock it out over 2 turns, avoiding the accuracy drops. Then on Cloyster, I can use Flamethrower for super effective damage that's also special, because Cloyster has outrageous physical defense. For the Magneton that's next, Charmeleon has a distinct advantage over Charizard. It does not have the flying type, so I'm not weak to Thundershock and I can set up here using Swords Dance. After only one, I figured I had enough and I used Dig to knock it out. Kadabra falls to a single use of Body Slam, I'm faster than the Psychic type, and then Dig manages the Flareon. I steamroll Giovanni. Swords Dance is really good. I only need +2, by the way. With the Rockets defeated, I can grab the TM for Mimic. All of the Pokemon are going to pick this move up. I think it will be used in all 3 of the first playthroughs, but I'm not sure about the follow-ups. After that, I swing by Sabrina's gym with 104 speed, which means I can move first against her initial Pokemon, Abra. Body Slam 1 hits, Kadabra's next, I go for Swords Dance once, then she uses X Defend, and I knock out her second Pokemon with Body Slam. But what about the Alakazam? I'm really just hoping that it's not going to attack me. It does, but with Psywave, doing pathetic damage. As a result, I hit with Body Slam, and I don't knock out. I thought that was going to be it, and maybe I shouldn't be doing this battle right now, but instead the Alakazam uses Psywave again. This move is so bad. Anyway, I get a free win over Sabrina as a result. Now with Charmeleon, we can begin going through the remaining gym leaders in quick succession. Koga is next, but I have Flamethrower and it's super effective. I one-shot all 3 of the Venonats, and then I 2-shot the Venomoth after it uses Toxic. This gives me a badge boost to my speed, which ensures that I move first against all of Blaine's Pokemon. I can set up Swords Dance once and then use Dig for super effective damage, one-shotting the Ninetales, the Rapidash, and surprisingly, the Arcanine goes down over 2 hits, and this is exclusively because it chose Reflect on turn 1. With Blaine's badge, I now earn myself a special boost, and that improves the damage from Flamethrower and helps me survive hits from Water-type moves. But I don't need to be worried about taking special hits at this point in the game because the next gym leader is Giovanni, the Ground-type specialist. While I go through the gym, let's just reflect on how this playthrough is going quickly. Charmeleon has a time of 38 minutes and 27 seconds with 0 resets. It is doing very well. So how possibly could everything go downhill from here? Well, Giovanni feels like part 1 of an obstacle course that is specifically designed to make fire types hate themselves in solo challenges of Pokemon Yellow. To prepare for him, I fight some optional trainers going up to level 50, and maybe this is gonna be enough? I'm not entirely sure. Well, let's go into the fight and see what Charmeleon can make happen. One advantage right away is I'm speed tied with his fastest Pokemon, Persian, meaning Dugtrio cannot damage me with Fissure, which is great. Because it doesn't know this, it can still use the move, which is what happens first turn, and I get a free Swords Dance in. This boosts my speed, so now I'm faster than the Persian as well. I go for one more turn of setup, but then Dugtrio uses Earthquake, doing massive damage, and I'm going to have to sweep now. Body Slam one-shots, I move on to the Persian. Unfortunately here, Charmeleon gets a critical hit, so I don't knock out the Persian, it uses Slash, and I faint. That's the first reset for the fire type. I think if I get lucky on the Dugtrio, I will be able to pull this off, and lucky consists of it using Dig, giving me a free turn to set up with Swords Dance before it does damage. However, then the ground type gets a critical hit and Charmeleon doesn't survive. In the next battle, it fails Fissure, then uses Earthquake, so it's essentially the same scenario, letting me get to +4. I do not crit the Dugtrio or the Persian this time, and I make it to the Nidoqueen for the first time. Dig here is super effective, so I can use it with my attack boosts to one-shot both of the Nidos and make it to the final Pokemon, Rhydon. My only worry now is that I won't have enough damage with my physical move to knock out this Rock type. And unfortunately for Charmeleon, it gets a critical hit, failing the range, and Rhydon chooses Rock Slide, which misses. As a result, my fire type pulls through with a victory over Giovanni. That's it for part 1 of the obstacle course. Now, when I came up with that metaphor for Charmeleon, I wasn't really thinking that the rival on Route 22 would be part of it. I have Swords Dance, he starts with Sand Slash, but it doesn't have Earthquake. Unfortunately, I did not heal before the battle, so I do have a loss here. I go back to the Pokemon Center, heal up, and then crush the rival. I do a little bit of extra training in Victory Road, because of course, part 2 of the obstacle course is Lorelei. Also, I'm gonna draw your attention to this item that I pick up. I rarely ever grab this. It is TM05, and that's the TM for Mega Kick. I am going to try to make use of this during the Elite Four. But before then, we need to go back and catch up with both Wartortle and Ivysaur. Wartortle's mid-game is kind of strange. It has a lot of options available to it, but they come with disadvantages that aren't immediately apparent. As I'm fighting the final junior trainer inside of Rock Tunnel, we have to make the first decision with Wartortle, and that is, do we want Withdraw on our set? Now, from my experience in Pokemon Yellow, it never makes sense to pass up a badge boost move on your first playthrough. So holding on to this is going to be a must in this playthrough. And I think in the follow-ups, it's also going to be a must. This is going to help Wartortle out a lot in the late game, but for now it's just dead weight on my moveset, because for the next few battles I'm not going to need badge boosts. And they're really only going to get good once I get Koga's badge for my speed and Blaine's badge for my special. This is essentially the theme for Wartortle. Where Charmeleon doesn't really experience moveset constraints in the mid-game, Wartortle does. It has Bubble Beam, Withdraw, Body Slam, and Dig. If I want to free up one of these slots and teach Ice Beam, I have to either give up my same type attack bonus move, my coverage move in the form of Dig, or Body Slam, essentially the best normal type move in the game. In this case though, Body Slam is going to go, I teach Ice Beam in its place, then I take on the rival in Pokemon Tower. Notice here that his team is slightly different than it was with Charmeleon. This is just because I'm facing the Vaporeon team. This is the first time the teams are actually different, even though the Eevee hasn't evolved yet. Wartortle doesn't have any problems against the Chandlers. Even with its lower speed stat, it's still faster than all these ghosts. Okay, so after cycling road and doing some training, I head into the Safari Zone, and this is where I have to make a tough call with all water types. Do you teach them Surf? This seems like a joke. It's not a joke. I swear, Surf is a tough call. The reason is there's no move deleter in Generation 1, and Surf is really not very good during the Elite Four. After all, we have Lorelei, who's essentially a water type specialist, then Agatha, who takes super effective damage from Dig, so Surf won't be the right call there. Lance's team mostly resists the move, and it has very little utility against the champion. Really, it's only good against his Sand Slash. And an ice type move like Ice Beam or Blizzard also fills that niche. So teaching Surf essentially makes the mid-game faster, but it makes the late game a little bit more difficult because I have less moveset flexibility. However, in this case with Wartortle, the decision is more straightforward than it would be with a Pokemon like Lapras or Starmie. So I'm going to teach Surf in the place of Bubble Beam and then head towards Sylph. Just like with Charmeleon, I do a bunch of training here, getting Wartortle to level 41 before I take on the rival. This is the first time his Magnemite has evolved into Magneton. Now, please look at this damage range. I am using Dig, which is super effective, and it's hitting Magneton's physical defense, which is its lower defensive stat, because Magneton has ridiculous special in Generation 1. But even then, I am not able to one-shot. In this case, it's not really a problem because it's going to go for Thundershock, which just doesn't do very much damage, and it's unlikely to paralyze me. But later on Rival 6's team and the Champions team, this Magneton is going to become a serious threat, and that's why I need Withdraw, in order to get enough damage for Dig to one-shot. Following in the path of Charmeleon, I stomp Giovanni and then head to Koga's gym. This battle is much more difficult when you're using a water type. First of all, his initial Venonat does not faint to my most powerful move, Surf, and then it has a grass type move, and because he has good AI, he is always going to choose this, putting Wartortle to sleep with Sleep Powder. The status doesn't last long enough for the first Venonat to knock me out, but the second one gets it done. I tried again, and this time the second Venonat uses Toxic on Wartortle, which is kind of perfect, because then the third Venonat will not use Sleep Powder. And while I do make it to the Venomoth, it sets up with Double Team and Surf isn't doing much damage, so now Toxic is a liability. I take a second reset here. So what does it take for Wartortle to defeat Koga? Well, I hate to say it, but I just get lucky. I make it to the Venomoth without any status conditions. As a result, I'm able to use Ice Beam. I was hoping for a freeze. I don't get it. Venomoth chooses Toxic. I start using Surf instead for more damage. Venomoth chooses Leech Life, and then Wartortle gets a critical hit, knocking out Koga's final Pokemon. Following this win, just like with Charmeleon, the next battles come in rapid succession. Wartortle is so overleveled that Erica is easy. This is usually the case because you can skip her until just before Giovanni. Now, surprisingly, Blaine is not always straightforward when using a water-type Pokemon. His fire types have decent special, and they're also pretty good with physical moves. That said, I have a way to play around them that makes this fight really simple. I can use Withdraw. This is going to badge boost my attack and my speed, and then my defense is going to be regularly boosted. If the Ninetales chooses Tail Whip, then I just get a free badge boost and I can do it all over again. If it chooses Confuse Ray, I don't really care because I'm setting up my defensive stat. Quick Attack will do very little damage, and I already resist Flamethrower. I didn't commit to this strategy maybe the way I should have. I could have used Dig and one-shot all of his Pokemon. Instead, I just wanted to see what the damage range on Surf would be like, and I get a critical hit knocking Ninetales out in a single turn. Okay, I'll just go for the sweep. Maybe Surf can pull it off. No, Rapidash survives, then it uses Takedown, crits, doing more than half in a single turn. Arcanine is last. Surf is doing more than half. It uses Fire Blast, but Wartortle survives on 15 hit points and knocks out Blaine's Ace. While my strategy was all over the place, I still pull through with a victory. I have physical damage with Dig against Sabrina. I can one-shot the Abra, and I thought I was going to one-shot the Kadabra, but I do way less than I was expecting after she uses an X Defend. Then Kadabra uses Psychic, lowering my special, and that's really not nice. I knock it out, move on to the Alakazam, it gets X Defend right away, then I hit it with Dig doing less than half, and Sabrina sets up Reflect. Now Wartortle is doing very little damage every turn. Alakazam hits with Psywave, bringing me once again down to 15 hit points. Dig brings the Alakazam to red health. It tries Reflect again, which is useless, and then Surf gets the knockout. So for a second time in the row, I win the battle with 15 hit points remaining. But Giovanni is going to be far easier than that, unless the Dugtrio hits me with Fissure over and over again because of my low speed. Right away it goes for Sand Attack, which badge boosts my speed. Then I was setting up Withdraw, and this pushes me over the threshold at 135. Wartortle is now moving faster than all of his Pokemon, so I'm going to try to sweep. Dugtrio goes down to a single Surf. Persian is next. It survives a critical hit on a sliver of health, and strikes back with a critical hit Fury Swipes, but it only gets 2 hits in. Now while Surf does miss, the Persian just kind of sits there doing nothing for a bit. Double Team, Screech, lowers my defense, but that doesn't really matter because once the Persian goes down, I should be fine, provided I don't miss too much. And of course, Sand Attack is awful in these games. I miss right away. Nidoqueen goes for Thunder, doing massive damage, and Wartortle will not survive another one of those. Surf knocks out Queen, I move on to King. It also has Thunder, but Surf hits, finishing it. So will the Rhydon get a hit in? And the answer is no. Okay, before the league, there's one more rival battle, and this one is a perfect opportunity for us to examine why Magneton is so awful. Look at its set right now. It has Thunder Shock and Thunder Wave. Since the rival has good AI by this point in the game, he is going to always be choosing one of his electric-type moves against my water-type Pokemon. That means, if the Magneton is able to survive one hit, if it prioritizes Thunder Wave, it will paralyze me and then outspeed and use Thunder Shock. If it doesn't use Thunder Wave, then it'll just attack me and deal decent damage. In this case, I don't really have to worry about Thunder Shock, but against the champion, it's going to be Thunderbolt. And unlike in Generation 2, Thunder Wave does not have the AI debuff on its accuracy, so this move is always going to hit provided it doesn't get a Generation 1 miss. At the beginning of the battle, I set up Withdraw 4 times to get badge boosts, and then I use Surf to knock out the Sand Slash. Ice Beam is here to manage the Execute so that I don't get paralyzed, and now hopefully, fingers crossed, Dig will have enough damage to knock out the Magneton in a single hit. And it does. Wartortle levels up, losing its new badge boosts, but Ninetales is next. It does crit with Quick Attack and Surf fails to knock it out, so it gets another Quick Attack in before it goes down. Then Kadabra comes in, and it is slightly faster than Wartortle by 6 speed. It chooses Psychic, and that's a reset. Okay, simple solution. Surf south of Pallet Town, fights Psych, who I skipped earlier into the run. This levels Wartortle up to 51 before I come back to the rival. Now I can set up on Sandslash and retain my badge boosts throughout the entire fight. With them, Ninetales is a one-shot using Surf, Kadabra is a one-hit using Dig. It does not set up Reflect, but I think it still might go down even if it did. Now, I said I retain my badge boosts throughout the whole battle, but that's not true. I lose them right before the Vaporeon. As you can see on turn 1, it can roll Hydro Pump against Wartortle, but it just chooses to go for Acid Armor after that, so it's not really doing much. I end up using Surf against the Water type and eventually finish it off. This is an anticlimactic way for this battle to end, but that's always the case with the Vaporeon team. His ace just doesn't really stand up to his other Pokemon. The Kadabra and the Magneton are by far the scariest. With Wartortle, I don't fight anyone in Victory Road, choosing to go straight for the Elite Four. In Indigo Plateau, I'm level 52, so I use 8 rare candies, boosting Wartortle up to level 60 before I'm ready to face Lorelei. Okay, so Ivysaur was by far the slowest in the early game, but throughout the mid-game, this thing has a major glow up. At level 31, it has enough damage to one-shot all of the Wrapping Lass's Pokemon, so no slowdowns here because of grass types. Also with Razor Leaf, it is fantastic against the Pokemaniac inside of the tunnel, as well as the self-destructing Hiker. By the way, I can use Vine Whip on him just in case I don't want to miss with Razor Leaf, so slightly more consistent doing things that way. Now with both the other two starters, I went into the Rocket Hideout to pick up one additional rare candy, but with Ivysaur, I am going to skip this item to try to save 25 seconds of time. Instead, I go straight for the department store, buy myself 3 Carbos, and then head to Pokemon Tower. The goal for me is to obtain Swords Dance as fast as is possible. Now, you have to get the Pokeflute and defeat everyone here in the tower in order to get access to Sylph. Before that takes place, there's a rocket blocking the door. So there are only a few more battles left before Ivysaur has become unleashed. I want you to notice here that I'm using Razor Leaf against the rival Sphero. This seems like a strange strategy, but the reason I'm not choosing Body Slam is because the Sphero is going to be spamming Mirror Move. If I use Body Slam, then it will get the same type attack bonus and have the chance to paralyze Ivysaur. But if I use Razor Leaf, then it can crit and still do massive damage. I knock out the Sphero with Body Slam, one-shot the Magnemite, Shelter, and Sandshrew all with Razor Leaf, and then I have to 2-hit the Eevee. Agatha Jr. is a little bit frustrating. Razor Leaf is not able to one-shot her Pokemon, instead it's a 2-hit if I get a critical hit. But on the second Ghastly, you can see here that Razor Leaf isn't always critting, and when that takes place, I have to 3-shot. This exposes Ivysaur to a lot of risks. Paralysis from Lick, Confuse Ray, and Nightshade dealing decent damage. Today though, no resets for Ivysaur, so I have to take on Jesse and James at the top of the tower. This is another one that is a little bit slower than is ideal. Again, I have to take 3 hits to knock out the Wheezing before I finally now have access to Sylph. I was playing a little bit on autopilot throughout the next section of the game, so I passed through Cycling Road to do a tiny bit of additional training and then complete the Safari Zone before I head to Saffron City. Unlike the other two starters, I'm going to do minimal training here in Sylph. I fight the Machoke guy because I want the rare candy, but other than that, I am not going to take on any optional trainers, shooting just for the Arbok guy to grab the card key. Now, just in case you don't know where Swords Dance is, let me show you. After going back through the teleporter that is blocked by the Arbok guy, you can go north to this teleport pad beside a rocket who has Hypno. Once in this room, there is a door that you unlock, and the item just past it is Swords Dance. By the way, I do loop around and fight one optional trainer, this rocket who has Sandshrew and Sandslash. He's really quick experience for Ivysaur, and that brings me up to level 37. Okay, time for the second best move in the game. I teach Swords Dance in the place of Tackle, and then I use 3 rare candies to bring Ivysaur up to level 40 before I take on the rival. My hypothesis going into this run is that Ivysaur can use most of its rare candies early on because it doesn't need them for the late game. It's going to be fast enough for all of the key targets, and I can use Swords Dance for badge boosts when I need them. Against the rival, I one-shot the Sandslash and the Cloyster using Razor Leaf. Then on the Magneton, which I usually say is scary, I can set up with Swords Dance because I resist Thunder Shock. After that, I knock it out with Body Slam, and then there is one flaw with this strategy. Kadabra is faster than Ivysaur, and I don't yet have Koga's badge to boost my speed. So it's able to move, use Confusion, and deal massive super effective damage. But I survive, knock out the Psychic type, and move on to Flareon, which is slower. Without a critical hit, which is very important, I would do less damage. Body Slam gets the knockout. Okay, as we face Giovanni, I am going to extend this battle just a little bit so that I can talk about one thing that I've had on my mind. I recently saw a comment on my Tyranitar vs Dragonite round 2 video, and I wanted to address it. The comment said something along the lines that short versus videos aren't really the best way to utilize the format, or it's not the most enjoyable way to have the format. I am really sorry that you don't like my length. That said, when I make any of these videos, I just try to tell the story in the most concise way that I can. Sometimes I don't need to show you the first playthroughs because I have already done that in a different video. And in this case, there isn't a lot of padding that I can add between major battles for these starters. The route becomes very simple after they achieve whatever threshold they need in the mid-game to start sweeping through gym leaders. Then I'm battling no optional trainers, essentially just walking from gym to the next gym. So I'm never going to bloat the scripts with extra stuff unless there's an opportunity for a joke. After Giovanni, I go to Erica. Swords Dance makes this trivial. It is a bit annoying setting up on the Tangela because it can waste time with Bind, but after that I just one-shot everything. Okay, Koga is a little bit more complicated. My Ivysaur arrives here at level 44 and it's partway through the level, so I don't want to use Roar Candies to go to 46 to get Sleep Powder, but that move would really help me here. The reason is Koga's going to be using Psychic most turns. Well, that's what I initially thought, but then I realized that he can also use Toxic because he's checking the Poison type against the Grass type interaction. Sorta silly, I'm a Poison type, so of course that doesn't do anything. But when he does hit me with Psychic, it can do massive damage, especially when Venonat crits, and Ivysaur is left with 29 hit points. But I was able to set up fully using Body Slam. The issue now is that the Venomoth is faster than Ivysaur, and I don't have much health left over. This is how Sleep Powder could help me. Putting the Venonat to sleep would give me setup for free, and then I would have enough health to survive the Venomoth's hit with either Leech Life, remember it does 4 times damage, or Psychic, which does super effective damage. But I'm going to keep playing the battle because there are still ways for me to win. Venomoth can choose Toxic, or Koga can use an X attack. That's what happens. I strike with Body Slam. I was praying that I wouldn't get a critical hit, and Ivysaur doesn't. Okay, time for Blaine, the toughest gym leader in all of Yellow version. I tried this fight without Sleep Powder to see if it was possible. Maybe Ninetales just won't roll Flamethrower, but then it does for 3 times in a row, and I have 3 quick resets. I came back in, tried again. This time I get to +4, and then I'm able to use Body Slam to knock out his lead. I squeeze in one more Swords Dance against the Rapidash. It uses Fire Spin, but Ivysaur does survive, and now I'm faster than all of his Pokemon. I knock out the Rapidash, use Body Slam on the Arcanine, but even with +6 attack, it does not do enough damage. Okay, I tried again. Obviously, I should not be doing this without Sleep Powder. I have another quick reset, and then I use 1 Rare Candy to bring Ivysaur up to level 46, and now with the sleep-inducing move, I think Blaine is going to be a little bit more straightforward. I get to the Arcanine with full health, and I figured I'm going to survive 1 hit from it, probably, right? So I can use Body Slam twice in a row and just knock it out, but no, I do not survive a Fire Blast, so I should have been using Sleep Powder. Also, this move is imperfect, it can miss. When it does and Ninetales uses Flamethrower, I have fast resets, especially when it critical hits. But the writing is on the wall for Blaine. I make it back to his ace, he used Sleep Powder, and then once it's snoozing, I can use Body Slam twice to finish him off. Okay, I actually have something to talk about before Sabrina. In her gym, there are 2 Psychics that have Water-type Pokemon, the Slowpoke and Slowbro line. Look at how close I am to leveling up to 47. I'm gonna fight this one guy because he has a single Slowbro, which I can one-shot using Razor Leaf. This will bring me up to 47 and improve my speed stat. I was hoping for 104, but after the Slowbro goes down, I only have 103, which is a speed tie with Sabrina's Abra. Well, that's good enough. Flash is pretty inaccurate anyway. I win the tie, put the Abra to sleep, and then I set up with Swords Dance. This badge boosts my speed stat, and after 3 turns, I am faster than the remainder of our Pokemon. From there, I one-shot all 3 of them. Giovanni is not as straightforward as you might think. The Dugtrio is faster and it can use Fissure. It can also use Sand Attack. In this case, it lowers Ivysaur's accuracy 3 times before I finally put it to sleep. I didn't want to just spam Swords Dance because then it could use Fissure and one-shot me. I didn't think that made sense. Anyway, I'm in a really bad position by the time I knock it out and move on to the Persian. I have low health and then it goes for Slash. Okay, a quick loss. Next time, I put the Dugtrio to sleep right away, and from there, things get much easier. Now, if you look at my experience, you'll notice that Ivysaur is likely going to level up during this fight, but that's not really a problem. As long as I outspeed the Dugtrio and the Persian, the rest of the battle is essentially going to be free, because due to the way the AI checks type interactions, the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking can only use Tail Whip against grass poison types. They are never going to choose Earthquake, even though it would do by far the most damage. Well, actually, they're just never going to do damage. So the only Pokemon after the Persian that can actually attack Ivysaur is the Rhydon, and the only way that's going to happen is if Razor Leaf misses. And guess what happens? It misses. So Rhydon has a chance, and you know what happens? Giovanni uses a Guard Spec. The rival before the league has given all of these Pokemon resets so far, and it is not different for Ivysaur. I make it to the Kadabra, but I don't have badge boosts in my speed stat because I set up on the Sandslash and then leveled up right after it. So the Kadabra moves first, uses Psychic, and Ivysaur faints. There is a simple solution to this. Don't set up on the Sandslash, instead put the Execute to sleep using Sleep Powder, set up here with Swords Dance after the level up, and then I outspeed the remainder of his team and can sweep through all of them. For Ivysaur, I do no training in Victory Road. It doesn't doesn't need it. Quickly before the league, let's examine where these Pokemon are standing. Charmeleon has maintained its advantage and is still in first place. Ivysaur has gained time and it's overtaken Wartortle, so it's in second place with the Water-type starter trailing. Although the Elite Four has the potential to shake up all of this. Theoretically, Ivysaur should be weak to Lorelei's Pokemon because they're ice types, but this typing feels like it was tacked on late in development to counter out dragon type Pokemon. There are no mono ice types in all of Pokemon Yellow. They're all dual types, and really the only Pokemon that feels like it was designed with this typing in mind is Jinx, because it is a primary ice type with a secondary psychic typing. Although Jinx's visual design does not scream ice. However, for Ivysaur against Lorelei, I can just put the Dugong to sleep and then set up with Swords Dance. While Body Slam can't one-hit the Dugong, it's still snoozing, so I knock it out for free. Then I have Razor Leaf for the Cloyster, and with a critical hit, I get the one-shot. Slowbro takes 2 hits to knock out, and it does choose to go for Psychic, dealing massive damage and lowering my special before I take care of it. But Jinx is too frail to survive a single hit. That leads to Lapras. I go for Sleep Powder because I know I'm going to 2-shot after the other damage ranges. It chooses Blizzard and gives Ivysaur a reset. Okay, so it looks like I'm at the mercy of Sleep Powder here against the Lapras. I miss again in my next battle. It once again chooses Blizzard and Ivysaur has a second reset. And if you're frustrated with me using sleep-inducing moves, don't worry, you're going to get more frustrated because it happens again. Also, sometimes this move just misses a bunch against the Dugong right at the beginning of the battle and it gets me with Aurora Beam. Okay, remember how I was saying that Lorelei is theoretically strong against Ivysaur? Well, I guess in practice, if I miss, she's also good against Ivysaur. But eventually, I am going to hit with Sleep Powder. When I do on the Lapras, it is a simple 2-hit using Body Slam, and then I move on to the Hiker in the next chamber. I don't actually need Swords Dance here, but I am using it, so Onix gets a massive dig off. It crit me to do that much damage. I don't think I actually needed the setup though, because Razor Leaf should be fine for the remainder of this fight. I'm using Body Slam here, that's fine. Razor Leaf one-shots the Onix. Then Machamp comes in, uses Strength, and are you kidding me? Well, this late game with Ivysaur is not going the way I was expecting it to. Okay, Razor Leaf the Onix, the Hitmonchan. By the way, it one-hits with a critical hit, so I don't even have to be worried about Ice Punch. I can also one-hit the Hitmonlee, so I make it to the Machamp with full health. And now I'm sure I can't faint unless it crits me twice in a row. It does survive 2 hits from Razor Leaf because this thing is fairly bulky. That allows it to go for a Karate Chop, doing more than half damage. And then Razor Leaf misses. Okay, I had a small heart palpitation in this moment. Luckily, Bruno chooses to use an X-Defend, and I take the win. Time to say goodbye to Razor Leaf. I'm going to teach Mimic in its place. This is a strategy that I came up with when using Victory Bell a long time ago, and it works for all grass types that get Swords Dance, Body Slam, and Sleep Powder. You do not need a grass type move for the remainder of the league. It is much better to have Mimic. In this case against Agatha, I can steal Lick from the first Gengar, which is a physical move. Although right away she switches, so I have to steal a move from the Golbat. I can in this case take Wing Attack. That'll work. By the way, this glitch with Mimic where she switches out and then I have to mimic something from the second Pokemon has a secondary side effect where the sprite disappears. Honestly, I love these games. They're so strange and janky. After setting up with Swords Dance, then I can use Wing Attack to knock out the ghosts. It 2-hits the Haunter. I move on to Arbok, one-shot with Body Slam, but I did level up just before it. So I'm slower than the final Gengar. It chooses Psychic, dealing massive damage. Wing Attack does do more than half, but then Gengar confuses Ivysaur and it knocks itself out. Okay, this league is really rough. Ivysaur is honestly falling apart. But hopefully you can see from the strategies that I'm choosing that I could win each one of these battles on the first attempt. There's no reason that it should be losing other than the fact that this strategy is just fairly inconsistent. But that's really what I've been learning over the past year. If you want to have exceptional times with every Pokemon, you need to take some risks. It doesn't make sense for Ivysaur to level up anymore because what's it going to solve by doing that? It's still just going to have to rely on Sleep Powder and Swords Dance in combination with moves like Body Slam and Mimic. I guess you could overlevel so much to the point that Razor Leaf can manage this fight, but that's just purely impractical when you're timing yourself. This time against the final Gengar, things go worse. I get hit by Hypnosis, Ivysaur's asleep, and while it's snoozing, it gets confused. I wish that was impossible. It's kind of frustrating. Anyway, Ivysaur wakes up, hits itself, does a ton of damage because it's boosted its attack. I'm trying to use Sleep Powder, and of course, it's missing all over the place. Eventually, the Gengar goes to sleep, and then it wakes up right away after I hit with Lick, doing very little damage. This battle was really discouraging, but I kept with it, and eventually, Ivysaur does come through with a victory. Right before Lance, I used 3 rare candies, bringing Ivysaur up to level 57. This will prevent the mid-battle level up. The strategy here is simple. Sleep the Gyarados, then use Swords Dance to set up, and with +6 I have enough speed to move first against the Aerodactyl. Now there are different ways to play this. I can mimic Ice Beam from the second Dragonair, but I think that will require 1 use of Sleep Powder if I want to avoid getting frozen by Ice Beam. I didn't want to play that way, so I instead mimic Hyper Beam from the Gyarados. From here, I one-shot both Dragonair and move on to the Aerodactyl. I was hoping for massive damage with Swords Dance boosted Body Slam against it, but instead I get a critical hit, doing roughly 1/5. But from there, Hyper Beam looks like it might have the damage range, unless I miss. Aerodactyl chooses Wing Attack, doing decent damage. Ivysaur has half health left over, but this time Hyper Beam does hit, and it does enough damage. Last is Dragonite, Hyper Beam connects, and that's that. I've made it to the champion. I've saved 1 rare candy, so I use that before the battle. I again want to ensure that I'm not leveling up mid-battle, losing my badge boosts. So now let's see how Ivysaur does with the final challenge in this playthrough. Okay, Sandslash is first. Now I need to mention something here which is hilarious. Again, Earthquake would do more damage to me, but it is locked into using Poison Sting because it sees the Poison type as super effective against the Grass type. And it's also comparing the Ground type against the Grass type, seeing that it's not very effective, so that's why that move gets deprioritized. I could set up here without using Sleep Powder, but I wanted to prevent the chip damage from Poison Sting, so I did put the Sandslash to sleep. It's not really necessary though, as you can see. I'm also going to mimic Earthquake, so I have a powerful ground type move for the Magneton, as well as for the Flareon at the end of the battle, because I probably will have leveled up by that point. Earthquake 2-shots the Sandslash, it 1-shots the Alakazam, and then I use Body Slam to 2-hit the Executor. Magneton falls to Earthquake, and then Cloyster comes in. So there's a choice here. Both of them are not entirely safe. If I use Earthquake, I'll probably 2-shot, but I'm exposed to the risk of being frozen by Ice Beam or having my attack dropped by Aurora Beam. There is also the chance that Cloyster crits and knocks Ivysaur out. I could prevent all of this using Sleep Powder, but I could also just miss. So I go for the offensive strategy, Earthquake hits twice, and Cloyster faints. As predicted, I level up by the Flareon, but I have super effective damage in the form of Earthquake, and I shred it. So in my first playthrough with Ivysaur, I get a time of 53 minutes and 30 seconds, with 16 resets, 0 blackouts at level 60, with a game time of 3 hours and 4 minutes. As far as first playthroughs go, I'm not really happy with this one. There were so many resets during the Elite Four. If the other two can make it through the league without too many, I think they're going to eclipse Ivysaur's time. Let's look at Charmeleon first. Against Lorelei, I want to damage the Dugong with Dig so that I avoid Bubble Beam on the first turn, and then Dugong hopefully will go for Rest, giving me time to set up with Swords Dance. This is exactly what happens. But I only get to +4 before I have to choose to attack the Dugong or let it attack me once with Bubble Beam. I chanced things, went for Swords Dance, and Dugong chooses Rest. Okay, that is perfect. If you didn't know, in the Lorelei battle, 2 out of 5 turns, she rolls her moves as if they're all neutral, so she has a chance of using anything. And on the second turn in battle, her Pokemon prioritize moves like Withdraw or Rest. Cloyster is next. I go for Dig. It crits, which is unfortunate, doing less than half, and the water type hits me with Clamp, dealing a lot of damage with every hit. Luckily, it only strikes twice. As a result, I get to use Flamethrower and knock out the defensive Pokemon. Okay, Slowbro time. Now, like I said, this thing is always going to use Withdraw on the second turn in battle. That means I can use Dig on the first turn to avoid its potential Surf, and then attack it when it's not going to do anything to me. The downside to this is that it can use Withdraw twice, but Dig is doing so much damage that Charmeleon still gets it. I one-shot Jinx and move on to the Lapras. For maximum damage, I choose Dig, and in this case, no critical hit, Lapras faints. Okay, Charmeleon beat what I was considering the second obstacle on its first attempt. That is a big advantage for the Fire type now, especially with how rough this fight was for Ivysaur. Also, the Machamp chooses Leer against Charmeleon, so another victory. And this is where things get easy because Agatha is simple. I set up Swords Dance once and then sweep with Dig. The Golbat does survive a hit from Body Slam, which is slightly annoying, I guess. It attacks with Leech Life, doing 3 damage, and from there it is a series of 3 one-hits. Now, prior to the league with Charmeleon, I used most of my rare candies, bringing it up to level 60. I was hoping this would make Lorelei much easier, and it did. But the consequence is I only have 3 rare candies left. I want to save at least one so I don't level up in the champion battle and lose my badge boosts from Swords Dance, and if I use 2 rare candies I don't go over a damage rounding threshold, I would just be level 64. So I'm going to use a single one, and now we have to see if Charmeleon can beat Lance at level 63. Gyarados is first. This is the Pokemon I am most scared of in this entire playthrough. I go for Swords Dance, badge boosting my special. Remember, setting up here does make Charmeleon more defensive so that I take less damage from Hydro Pump. And look at how much it does with a non-crit. It takes Charmeleon all the way down to red health. So how much damage will Body Slam deal? And the answer is more than half, and it also paralyzes, preventing Gyarados from moving again. This is the luck I was looking for. As a result, I knock out Gyarados and move on to the first Dragonair. Body Slam is able to one-shot, but then I run into a problem. I have low health, and the second Dragonair has Bubble Beam. I don't have Mimic, so I can't steal a move. I guess I just have to go for Body Slam. And in this case, without a critical hit at +2 attack, it is not enough to one-shot the Dragonair consistently. It chooses Bubble Beam, and Charmeleon faints. Okay, let's think back to when I was in Victory Road. I picked up the TM for Mega Kick. This was intentional because I was wondering if after one Swords Dance, I would be able to use this move to one-shot the Gyarados. I tried out in the next fight, and after one Swords Dance, no, I just barely don't have enough damage. Well, it was cool to try it, but reverting back to the Body Slam strategy makes more sense because it has the upside of paralysis. Also, as you can see, I taught Rest in the place of Flamethrower, so Charmeleon no longer has a Fire-type move. But this is the best way to play Lance. I can set up with Swords Dance turn 1, then on turn 2, I either want Paralysis or a miss from Hydro Pump. If either of those two things happen, then I'll knock the Gyarados out over 2 turns. I can sustain damage from one Hydro Pump because then later in the fight, on say the second Dragonair, I can heal up using Rest and make it through the remainder of Lance's team. One additional upside for Fire types is that whenever they're resetting against Lance, they come really quickly. It's not like I'm struggling on the Dragonite, and then I have to go back and beat all 4 Pokemon all over again. In this case, I know by the second turn if I'm going to be moving on with the battle or if I need to reset. Charmeleon has a bunch of resets here until it finally knocks out the Gyarados again and moves on to the Dragonair. I use Rest against the first one, healing up. It chooses Hyper Beam, which is perfect, giving me time to recharge, and then I use Dig for additional damage to knock it out in a single hit. Against the second Dragonair, I'm going to continue my setup with Swords Dance so I can do massive damage to the Aerodactyl and the Dragonite. The downside to this approach is that when it's using Bubble Beam, it has a 33% chance every turn of lowering my speed, and this does happen. So I'm not able to move first against the Aerodactyl, but it uses Swift twice in a row, and this doesn't do enough damage. So it's time for Dragonite. I choose Body Slam, and without a critical hit, I do not do enough damage. It strikes back with Thunder, and Charmeleon faints. Alright, remember what I was saying about struggling against the Dragonite? I am struggling against the Dragonite. This fight has gone really sour. I reset 2 more times before I make it by the Gyarados again. This is even worse than just losing to the final Pokemon on a long team. I lose, and then I have to fight the Gyarados again. There is a simple solution to this fight, but unfortunately I don't figure it out during this first playthrough. Instead I rely on Rest to heal up so that I have good health against the Dragonite. That allows Charmeleon to survive a Thunder and attack twice, knocking out Lance's ace. Okay, time for the champion. I have Fire Blast. This move is just so I can knock out the Sand Slash quickly with special damage. Turn 1 Swords Dance to badge boost myself as much as possible. I take a huge hit from Earthquake. There is no way I can survive 2 of those, so I have to go for Fire Blast now and hope that I have the damage. Charmeleon does. Alakazam faints to Dig, and I move on to Executor. Here I can play slowly, choosing Rest, and then Swords Dance to max out my attack before I take on the remainder of the team. Dig one-shots Magneton, Fire Blast one-shots Cloyster, and Dig one-shots the final Flareon. In my first playthrough with it, Charmeleon gets a time of 55 minutes and 9 seconds, with 14 resets at level 66 with a game time of 3 hours and 18 minutes. So while the Fire type did perform very well in the early game, it falls behind by the late game. But there is a world where I figured out Lance a little bit quicker, and then it got a better time than Ivysaur, although both of these Pokemon are going to benefit from multiple playthroughs, so I think the verdict is still out as to which one is better. Here's the thing though, Wartortle's just sitting on the sidelines and now it's like, hold my beer, let's do this. Lorelei is a slow fight. The Dugong's gonna use rest. I'm gonna have time to set up with withdraw because her Pokemon can't do very much damage. As long as Surf is able to 3-shot her lead, she won't be able to infinitely Surf, and Wartortle has the damage. I can use Surf to knock out the Cloyster in 2 hits, and then I have Mimic for the Slowbro. This is so I can steal Amnesia, set up my special, and then deal more damage with subsequent Surfs. I do use Dig to knock out the Psychic type though, because it was setting up with its own Amnesias. And I probably should have continued to use the physical move against the Jinx. Surf barely doesn't do enough damage. I did get a critical hit, that's why I failed the damage range, but I think a critical hit from Dig would have one-shot. So Lapras is last, Surf is not able to one-shot, he uses Confuse Ray, Wartortle hits itself, Body Slam paralyzes, Wartortle hits itself again, I tank another Body Slam, Wartortle is fully paralyzed, but finally it uses Surf and Lapras goes down. Bruno is really easy, I didn't even need to set up with withdraw. Agatha, on the other hand, is more complicated. I use Mimic right away, but then she switches into her Golbat. This is not ideal, I wanted Substitute to block her attacks with status conditions. Then Wartortle gets hit by Toxic and I choose to reset. Another downside here is that the first Gengar has Mega Drain and it can deal so much damage with this move. When it crits, it's half. Once again, I am not going to be able to use Substitute if this thing just keeps spamming Mega Drain. And in a stroke of really bad luck, it gets a second critical hit, bringing Wartortle to 4 hit points. So I guess it's nice that I can survive 2 of those, but it goes for a third! 3 in a row! She does not have good AI. This is purely her randomly rolling Mega Drain over and over again. Now, I used a rare candy before the next battle to ensure that I wouldn't level up in the middle of the fight so that I would get my badge boosts off successfully. Also, I only want enough speed to move first against all of her Pokemon, so I use a single withdraw, that's enough. And then I choose to go for Dig instead of mimicking Substitute. I one-shot the first Gengar, 2-shot the Golbat, 1-shot the Haunter, 1-shot the Arbok, and 1-shot the Gengar. So, trying to get Substitute was the mistake. Just set up once and then sweep. Wartortle is capable of that. 1 rare candy before Lance, and I also teach Blizzard in the place of Dig. I didn't want to have to rely on Surf to knock out the Gyarados, and then later in the fight I can use Mimic to get Ice Beam if I'm struggling with my PP. After all, as I mentioned before in the video, I have been criticized for my length. And speaking of length, this battle is going to be fairly long. I can set up almost infinitely against the Gyarados. Hyper Beam won't do much damage. This gives me more time to set up with withdraw if I want it, and if Gyarados chooses to go for Leer, then I get a free badge boost and I can just use withdraw again. However, like I said before, length for length's sake is not always the best idea. So after only +2 from withdraw, I have 174 speed. I will now move first against every single one of Lance's Pokemon, and I think for Wartortle, that is more than enough. Also, not to mention, I am running low on health. Gyarados goes down, I one-shot the Dragonair with Blizzard, the second Dragonair with Blizzard, and then I can use Surf on the Aerodactyl. Last is Dragonite. Blizzard successfully hits because in Generation 1 it has 90% accuracy, and with that, Lance is defeated. Time for the champion. Unlike the other 2 Pokemon where this fight is actually difficult, with Wartortle it really isn't. My moveset currently is Surf, Mimic, Withdraw, and Rest. Withdraw and Rest together give me consistent setup against the initial Sandslash. Surf is gonna knock it out, and I can use Mimic to steal Earthquake so that I have good damage for the Alakazam, the Ninetales, and the Magneton. Really, there's only one downside here, and that's the fact that I am slow to knock out the Exeggutor as well as the Vaporeon. But because of his good AI, the champion doesn't have options against Wartortle when using these Pokemon. The Exeggutor is going to spam Leech Seed over and over again, never choosing to use its other 3 moves. And Vaporeon is locked into using Quick Attack, which is essentially useless now that I'm at +6 defense. However, before we make it to his final Pokemon, does Wartortle have the damage it needs to manage Magneton? After 6 turns of badge boosts, the answer is, of course, yes. So, Vaporeon's last, Quick Attack can't do much, and Earthquake is able to 2-shot. In my first playthrough with it, Wartortle clocks in with a time of 53 minutes and 53 seconds, with 7 resets at level 65. This is a game time of 3 hours and 21 minutes. Okay, so check out what happened. Ivysaur is the fastest Pokemon in the first first runs. Wartortle is in second place, and Charmeleon is in a distant third. Well, relatively distant. Wartortle and Ivysaur were fairly close together. One thing that's interesting about this is if we look at game time, Wartortle and Charmeleon's results reverse. Wartortle is the slowest by game time, whereas Ivysaur is by far the fastest. That's just because it's relying on very inconsistent strategies throughout a majority of the game. Also, in terms of level at finish, Ivysaur dramatically outperforms the other two starters, with Charmeleon having a slight disadvantage in the very end of the game. Although that may go away in my second playthrough, or it may get even worse if I realize I have to have a higher level for Lance. Okay, so now let's get into optimized playthroughs, and for these I want to give a huge shout out to Zealous Pawn. Thank you so much for submitting your strategies over on my solo running Discord. The link for it is in the description, check it out if you want to contribute to these videos. Also this year, to say thank you to everyone who has helped me out, I made a special ROM hack incorporating a bunch of details from the channel into the game. All of the gym leaders have new types and completely new teams, and a bunch of the random NPCs also have their teams modified to be a little bit more on brand for my channel. Also, you can collect every single Pokemon in the Pokedex with some special editions, although you're gonna have to look particularly hard in order to find them. Hopefully you all have some fun playing this over the holiday season. There is no Wikipedia for it, so you have to discover things like you would have when we were kids. Today we're going to start with Charmeleon. All the damage ranges I show you on screen are going to be derived from Zealous Pawn's root file that he shared with me over on my solo running Discord. I went in and I looked at everything that he had done in his playthroughs, and in the end I came to the conclusion that I couldn't really do anything better with Charmeleon. There was one small change that I made in the early game. Instead of fighting the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym after the mandatory bug catcher, you can fight the second bug catcher inside of the forest for a similar amount of experience. The junior trainer in Brock's gym ends up being quite difficult if you fight him on minimum battles, and Charmeleon should do one extra battle just so that it has good damage ranges with Ember against Brock's Pokemon. We're all here for numbers though, so let's look at how things stack up. Charmeleon on minimum battles fights the junior trainer at level 8. This means Ember is going to 3-hit the Diglett and likely 3-hit the Sandshrew. There is some upside for a potential 4-turn battle here if it gets very lucky against the Diglett and then gets the 1 in 4 damage range on the Sandshrew. But counting on this doesn't make any sense. I rarely show this part of the experience router, but here you can see that the junior trainer is providing 334 experience points for the battle. If I remove the junior trainer and add in the bug catcher instead, notice that he gives 249 experience. While this is less, the battle is so much faster. It is guaranteed to be only 4 turns. The thing is, in both of these scenarios, I am the same level for Brock, 10 on the Geodude and level 11 for the Onix. Long story short, fight bug catcher 2 instead of the junior trainer. I do want to mention one alternative, which is fighting both of them. It is actually way easier to battle the junior trainer after you defeat the bug catcher. Although this route ends up being too conservative, and I wanted to give Charmeleon as much time as I could in the early game so that once it gets to Lance, it has some wiggle room to have multiple resets. Okay, so level 10 for Brock. It's going to be a 5-hit with Ember on the Geodude, and then as many as 7 turns against the Onix. Although both of these can be faster if Charmeleon gets some critical hits. In my second playthrough, I'm using the junior trainer strategy. Again, it's just riskier and I have to restart the playthrough multiple times if I lose to the junior trainer, because that is a possible outcome. And I had many restarts there before I figured it out. That said, using this strategy and cutting a bunch of training from the early game does mean that Charmeleon gets an advantage on its Brock split. It's now able to defeat him in only 3 minutes and 7 seconds. That is 1 minute and 13 seconds faster than my prior attempt. On Route 3, it makes most sense for Charmeleon to fight the bug catcher with 4 Pokemon. This provides more experience and the battle is very fast because Ember one-shots everything. In Mount Moon, Mega Punch makes the most sense, and I only do minimum battles in this area of the game. In Cerulean City, fighting the rival first and then doing minimum battles on Route 24 and 25 brings Charmeleon to level 23, but I can't move first against Misty's Pokemon yet. I don't want to backtrack from Vermilion City, wasting time, so instead of doing that, fighting the Rocket outside of Cerulean City and then the one mandatory junior trainer inside the gym levels it up to 24. From there, using 2 rare candies brings it up to 26, where it has 57 speed, enough to move first against the Starmie. The damage ranges for Dig are okay, 59.4% chance to 2-shot the Starmie. Bubble Beam does between 48 and 57% damage, meaning Charmeleon is likely going to get 2-shot by this powerful water type move, but Starmie can also choose Water Gun or Misty can use an X defend. I don't want her to boost her defenses though, because then Dig is going to 3-hit. This is the first inconsistent fight in the run. That said, level 26 with 57 speed feels perfect here. It balances consistency with time, and I shave off 2 minutes and 15 seconds over my previous split. On the SSN, picking up Rest is an absolute must. Do not skip this with Charmeleon. If you do, Lance is going to be disastrous. Picking up the Hideout Candy allows Charmeleon to use them during the earlier portions of the late game before it gets to Victory Road, and then I can skip that candy entirely, saving a small amount of time. Outside of the one optional battle required for this candy, Charmeleon isn't going to have to do much more training. Okay, mid-game, Erica, then I go to the department store and I buy protein. This is a critical mistake. I need to buy 3 calcium here. You'll see why at the end of this run. After that, Pokemon Tower and then Sylph. In here I fight 6 trainers, and I am officially going to name all of these people now because I'm fighting them in so many playthroughs and I need a way to talk about them other than just saying, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if you're an audio-only listener. Okay, the first Rocket's name is Machoke Candy. I think it makes sense you fight this guy because you want access to 1 more candy. Also for a Carbos in the Earthquake TM, but I think saying like Machoke Candy Carbos Earthquake is a little bit wordy. Also, there's a great image in my mind for this Machoke trainer. It's like a rare candy, but with Machoke on the wrapper. Maybe this Rocket secretly has a candy-producing business. I don't know, we'll have to get art for him at some point. After all of these solo challenges, he has essentially become a mandatory trainer. There are very few routes that skip him, really just Pokemon in the S tier. Okay, there's this Rocket who has 4 Pokemon. Notably, in the overworld, he's standing by sort of a reception desk, so I'm gonna call him Reception Rocket. On the next floor down, there is this scientist, and his team is completely stacked. It has 5 Pokemon. This is one of the largest teams in the mid-game of Pokemon Yellow. I think I'm just gonna call him Stacked Scientist for now and move on. On the next floor, there's another scientist. He's going to be called Protein Scientist because he blocks the room for the protein. There's Mandatory Arbok next. And then finally, this scientist who is stuck over here in this room. It's kind of a meeting room, but there's sort of like a hidden passageway to get to it. There's a door that you can unlock and desks in a weird configuration. I really wish I had a good idea what to call this guy. For now, I'm just going to use my generic name that I have been using behind the scenes. So that's 3 Scientist because he has 3 Pokemon and he is a scientist. If you have good ideas for what to call him, let me know in the comments. Okay, so now we can summarize this route a little bit more efficiently. Machoke Candy, Reception Rocket, Stacked Scientist, Protein Rocket, Mandatory Arbok, and 3 Scientist. Okay, we need more names for random trainers that I am constantly fighting. Cycling Road is next. At the top of the route, there is this one biker who has 4 Grimers. His name is going to be Grimy Biker. Just south of him is another biker who has 2 Weezings. I think we should call him Double Weezing. And then there's the final guy on the route who has 5 Pokemon. In the past, I've called him the Van Man Biker because Van Man originally battled him, I think in the Parasect race, to gain a lot of experience. Now, some people suggest to me that I should just call these trainers by their names in Fire Red, but that can be confusing for new viewers on the channel because if I say the Grimy Biker and I show you an image of a biker that has 4 Grimers, you immediately associate which trainer I'm talking about. But if I say something like Todd, then you're just like, who is Todd? I don't know who Todd is. You have to go look it up. It's frustrating and annoying. Also, for those of you who actually know this guy's name, you're going to be like, Scott, it's not Todd. And if it is Todd, that's a miracle because I literally just pulled that name out of thin air. Okay, so the Van Man Biker doesn't help us with associations, so we got to give this guy a name that actually works. And in this case, since he is the final trainer on the route and he has the most Pokemon of any trainer in this region, I think that calling him Biker Boss makes sense. So the Cycling Road summary for Charmeleon is Grimy Biker, Double Weezing, and Biker Boss. By the way, you might think that it is silly that I name all these trainers, but it really isn't. It gives us really fast ways to start talking about specific sections of the game. And it's also a lot more flavorful and fun than saying Biker 7, Biker 8, and Biker 12. Those are their internal indexes. But again, they cause problems with association and fast communication, especially with people who don't have as much knowledge. And memorizing trivial numbers and facts is not one of my favorite pastimes. My ADHD consistently deletes these sort of things from my brain. Okay, so fighting all of these trainers up until now has synergized towards a goal. Inside of Koga's gym, defeating the 2 mandatory jugglers gives Charmeleon enough experience to just barely level up to 42 where it learns Flamethrower before the Bug-type specialist. Charmeleon then has guaranteed 1 hits on all the Venonats and a 2 hit on the Venomoth. I fight 3 trainers for experience before Blaine. Psych, then the No Questions Super Nerd, and the Solo Rapidash. This gives Charmeleon level 44. Unfortunately, Blaine is kind of inconsistent. His Pokemon can get critical hits and do a lot of damage with physical moves. Ninetales crits me with Flamethrower here, and Charmeleon gets its first reset in its second playthrough against the Fire-type specialist. Blaine, always causing problems for solo runs. He actually causes more because I get a second reset here before I finally defeat him on my third attempt. Just for reference, here are damage ranges, so even with 2 uses of Swords Dance, it's not perfectly consistent when using Dig. 97% chance to knock out the Ninetales, almost a guaranteed one hit on the Rapidash. There is a very unfortunate low damage range with a critical hit that will not knock it out, so that's why this damage range isn't perfect. And then on the Arcanine, I have an 84.4% chance. Really getting set up on the Ninetales is the hardest part. And that brings up something Zelspawn wrote about Charmeleon in the Discord. He said, "This is one Pokemon that really benefits from setting up on multiple Pokemon." Let me demonstrate what I mean. If I set up once with Swords Dance, these are my damage ranges. You can see they are identical for Ninetales and Rapidash, but for Arcanine it takes 2 hits with Dig. So if I want to improve the chances I one-shot the Arcanine and don't get hit by something like Takedown, then I want to set up twice. But I don't want to be exposed to Confuse Ray while I'm setting up with Swords Dance. So 1 turn of Swords Dance against the Ninetales, then Dig, knock it out, move on to the Rapidash, which has a status move. This is Growl, lowering my attack, so it's safe here to set up with Swords Dance to get +4 attack and then one-shot the Arcanine. You will be looking at the footage going, "Scott, that's not what you're doing." I know, currently you're watching my second Charmeleon playthrough and I am learning these lessons through trial and error. The fact that I'm resetting here to Blaine is largely just because I don't know how to play this fight well yet. He can still beat you even if you do the correct strategy, it's just much less likely. Next is Rival 5, and now with Blaine's badge I can badge boost here, which is important. With 1 Swords Dance, then Flamethrower is going to one-shot the Sandslash and the Cloyster with fairly decent odds, 93.5% and 80.5%. Beyond there, Dig 1 hits his 3 remaining Pokemon. I do want to go back though and show you the damage ranges that would have happened here if we had fought him when I was in Sylph previously. This would prevent some backtracking, but as you can see, I don't have Flamethrower yet, so I have to rely on Dig against the Sandslash and the Cloyster. If I want to get better damage ranges, I could set up more Swords Dances, but that increases the likelihood that I'm going to get hit by Sand Attack from the Sandslash, or by one of its slashes, which deals between 42 and 50% damage. So this is why backtracking here makes sense. Doing things in this order too means I can stay in Saffron City after defeating the final people in Sylph and go to Sabrina right away. I have a special boost for this fight, making Charmeleon more defensive, and its speed is above the Kadabra's, so there's only 1 Pokemon on her team that can move first. For this fight, all I need is 1 Swords Dance, and then I can one-shot pretty much everything. The Alakazam does have a chance to survive, but it's only 16%. Once I knock it out, I level up to 48, and here Zealous Pawn found that you can use 8 rare candies to level Charmeleon up to 56. From here, his route does not use another rare candy. There is essentially a principle at play here that I have never experimented with before. It is, how early can you use your last rare candy? If you find out you can use your last rare candy earlier into a run, you lower the cognitive load on the late game. You don't have to remember a bunch of like 1 rare candy before Agatha, 1 rare candy before Lance, but not 1 rare candy before the champion. That stuff really throws you off when you're getting stressed. You also potentially cut rare candies from the route so you don't have to pick up extras, and then you also make all of the battles after the point where you use the last rare candy much easier. The reason this sort of play can be very beautiful from a numbers perspective, at least for me, is that if you do it right, you can map out where you level up in every single battle from the point you use the rare candy until the end of the run. In this screenshot, you can see the levels up into column. That is showing you which Pokemon you will have a new level for. So key here is that for Lance, Charmeleon levels up after the final Pokemon, so it will retain all of its badge boosts during that fight. Before we get to him though, we have to talk about the remaining trainers. Giovanni is one where it makes sense to split the Swords Dance setup. 1 on Dugtrio and then 1 on Persian. There is the chance to reset here. If you get hit by Earthquake and then Slash, usually Charmeleon's gonna faint. Luckily it's a pretty quick reset, and once you get +4, you will one-shot the Rhydon, so if Charmeleon makes it by the Persian, it will have 1. Okay, Victory Road. Some other trainers that need names. We have the Starter's Cool Trainer, fairly self-explanatory I think. Then we have the Chansey Cool Trainer, and finally the Victory Bell Cool Trainer. Fighting these people ensures that Charmeleon will level up as planned. For Lorelei, I can use Dig to dodge the first attack, and then hopefully she'll use Rest. She doesn't always. It is possible to get resets here, and they're very frustrating when they do happen. But if she does use Rest, then setting up Swords Dance and sweeping her team is very straightforward. Beyond that, things are streamlined until we hit Lance. Here, major moveset change up. To Mimic, Rest, Body Slam, and Swords Dance. So the key that I missed in my first playthrough is the fact that I need Mimic to steal Ice Beam to make the final 2 Pokemon consistent. Without it, Charmeleon is not going to have a good time, but with it, it can have an amazing time, as is the case here. I defeat Lance on my first attempt. By the way, one setup with Swords Dance ensures that you have enough speed to move first against the Aerodactyl, so you're moving first against everything, and Body Slam does enough damage. You just need to get lucky on the Gyarados, either missing Hydro Pump or with Paralysis. Also, use Rest on the first Dragonair. This is key. You don't want to get hit by Bubble Beam from the second Dragonair and have your speed lowered before the Aerodactyl and the Dragonite. Okay, champion damage ranges. After one Swords Dance, Charmeleon has a 77.6% chance to knock out the Sand Slash. And then I can set up 2 more Swords Dances against the Executor so that I have better badge boosts for the Cloyster. As per the experience routing that I showed earlier, Charmeleon is going to level up after the Cloyster goes down, so it will still have badge boosts here. The thing is, look at Zealous Pawn's damage range. 70.3% chance when using Fire Blast against Cloyster. And then watch how it goes for me. The answer is really not well. I have lost a bunch of fights for miscellaneous reasons, like Earthquake critting me on the Sand Slash, not doing enough damage to knock it out in a single turn, and then eventually when I do make it to the Cloyster, this thing survives. Do you remember the protein that I bought earlier? Yeah, that was the key mistake. If I take away the calcium from Zealous Pawn's root, then we have a sense for how my Charmeleon is faring. And you can see here that Fire Blast only has a 55.6% chance to one-hit the Cloyster. Also, without these calcium, I only have a 59.3% chance to one-hit the initial Sand Slash when using Fire Blast off of 1 badge boost. As a result of this one small, seemingly inconsequential mistake, I end up with a worse second playthrough when compared with my first. I'm a minute and 32 seconds slower, and Charmeleon has 22 resets. Now, Charmeleon was on track for an outstanding time before this, so of course I came back to do more playthroughs to get its time down. Thing is, then stuff can go wrong against Lorelei, where the Dugong just is determined to use Bubble Beam. Eventually it should use Rest, and when it does, I'm going to sweep, but if it just keeps spamming Bubble Beam, then Charmeleon is going to lose. I also have no way of getting Lance faster than he was last time. I take 3 more resets here to a total of 12 before I make it back to the champion. Luckily this time I beat him on my first attempt, and Charmeleon clocks in with a third playthrough time of 47 minutes and 38 seconds, with 10 resets, 0 blackouts at level 64, with a game time of 2 hours and 57 minutes. That's an improvement over my first run of 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Honestly, I'm really happy with this. Well, I would be, but like I said, Zealous Pawn was posting his results in my Discord, and that made me feel pretty bad about this time. He was able to get a result of 43 minutes and 4 seconds with 2 resets at level 64 and a game time of 3 hours and 33 minutes. While his game time is 36 minutes slower than mine, his real time and his resets are far better. So you know what I have to do? I have to go back in and keep trying. I spent an entire day with Charmeleon just trying to get it a better run. So many playthroughs ended at Lorelei, so many ended earlier on from me making silly mistakes. A lot of times the early game just kind of fell apart at Misty, but eventually I made it back to the champion and defeated him again. And in my 4th playthrough with Charmeleon, it gets a time of 47 minutes and 42 seconds. That is 4 seconds slower than my previous finish. Now, part of that day was continuing to work from here, trying to get a 5th Charmeleon playthrough, and I was unable to get one that was close to this time. So today, 47 minutes and 38 seconds is going to be its final result that I'm going to report. Just so everyone's aware, for fairness, I allocate the same amount of playtime to each Pokemon, but sometimes this results in multiple runs, and sometimes it's only like 1 more additional run. For a Pokemon like Wartortle that we're going to talk about next, you can just sit down and play multiple playthroughs. You don't really feel the need to restart a lot, at least not nearly as much as Charmeleon does. The fact of the matter is that fire types in Generation 1 are just far more brittle than other typings, especially the water type. It is very robust in these games. Well, until the champion, then the water type starts to run into some problems. Okay, just like Charmeleon, this is going to be Zealous Pawn's route for Wartortle. It is fantastic. I could not modify it. I tried to, and every time I did, Wartortle resisted me and I got a bunch of resets, and I figured out why Zealous was doing what he chose to do. So for Brock, mandatory bug catcher in Viridian Forest, then the junior trainer inside of his gym. This gives you more than enough experience to make Brock easy, as well as the next section of the game manageable, because Wartortle is not fast throughout Route 3 as I've emphasized before. Although once it gets Water Gun, then it starts to speed up. In Mount Moon I get Mega Punch, defeat the Hiker, and then make it to Cerulean City. For Misty, I use Bide, knocking out the Staryu first, then using Bide on her ace. Bubble Beam for the rival, fight the Hiker instead of the junior trainer by Seismic Toss, and then complete this section of the game. On the SSN, it is important to pick up Rest. I wanted to skip this, but I don't think it's a good idea. There are some potentials to minimize its usage in the late game, but they are overall less consistent. Okay, Surge. This is the first fight that's frustrating because Dig only does between 80 and 95% damage with a single hit. Wartortle needs to attack twice, and Thunderbolt does between 95 and 112% damage. So if he chooses his one electric type move, then potentially he will one-shot. We're watching my 4th playthrough now, and he does knock out Wartortle once before I defeat him. Unlike Charmeleon, which does go through the early game a little bit faster, Wartortle starts to gain advantages in the mid-game. I don't have to go into the hideout to grab an extra rare candy early on. For the department store, I buy 2 protein to improve the physical damage of Dig. Okay, time for some mid-game training. Grimy Biker, Biker Boss, after the Safari Zone, Machoke Candy, Reception Rocket, Stacked Scientist, Protein Rocket, and Mandatory Arbok. You see, all those names? Pretty useful now. Unlike Charmeleon, Wartortle will be able to battle the rival now. I just used 6 rare candies prior to the fight to bring it up to level 44. Surf one-shots the Sandslash. I'm gonna 3-hit the Cloyster. Yes, Surf is the correct choice. Then on the Magneton, Dig has a 43.2% chance to one-hit, and for the Flareon, it has a 95.5% chance to one-shot. Okay, this is where the route gets really fun. The added experience from Jesse and James, Giovanni, the 2 mandatory jugglers in Koga's gym, and the tamers inside the gym give Wartortle a lot of experience, and along the way it levels up to 47 where it can learn Hydro Pump. Remember how Koga was problematic because he has sleep-inducing moves and I couldn't do enough damage to one-shot the Venonats? Yes, Hydro Pump is the answer that Zealous Pawn came up with. I don't think I would have found this myself. If I had played this run, what I would have been far more likely to do was go up, pick up the TM for Mimic, then steal Sleep Powder and use that move to defeat Koga's team with multiple shots per turn using Surf. Now that approach is just going to be worse, because Hydro Pump has an 80% chance to hit, whereas Sleep Powder has a 75% chance to hit. Plus, the Pokemon can wake up, and using the move multiple times just drops the odds of success. For damage ranges here, the router is highlighting Surf because it's more consistent, but Hydro Pump has an 80% chance on the first 2 Venonats and then a 60% chance on the 3rd one. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter what you do for the Venomoth. I personally like Surf just because Dig gives time for double team, Hydro Pump can miss, and overall once I make it to the end of the battle I want to play as consistently as is possible. Of course, this can still go wrong if you miss or something like that, so I have 1 reset here against Koga before I defeat him. There are no optional or mandatory trainers between him and Blaine, who's next. Surprisingly, this fight actually deserved a lot of thought. I played early Wartortle runs and had so many resets here, which made me very frustrated. I eventually came to the conclusion that I should be using Withdraw against the Ninetales and then spamming Dig for the increased physical damage due to the badge boost. I confirmed that Zealous Pawn was also doing this during his routes. This is so much better than trying to rely on a water type move here. I did play around with using Hydro Pump to one-shot the Rapidash and then Surf for the Ninetales and the Arcanine, but this is less consistent. After only 3 withdraws, Dig has a 90.9% chance, that is 90.9, not 99, to one-shot the Ninetales, and then from there it's going to one-shot the Rapidash and 2-hit the Arcanine. But it is more ideal to use Surf on the final Pokemon just because it's special damage and Arcanine likes to set up with Reflect. After Blaine, fight Erica, then Sabrina. This fight is inconsistent, and it is annoying with Wartortle because you're relying on Dig for physical damage, which takes 2 turns, giving her time for X defends, reflects, and then when you're above ground, she can hit with Psychic and crit you. I have 2 resets in this playthrough, which is unlucky before I make it to Giovanni. Now that Wartortle has the Volcano badge, it gets boosts for its special whenever it triggers the badge boost. Setting up twice here with Withdraw gives good damage ranges against the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking at only level 51. 90.9% on the first one, and then 86.4% on the second. It levels up going into the Rhydon, but Surf just one-hits of course. Okay, I hope you're ready for some beautiful numbers. Check this out. After Giovanni, Wartortle is level 52. If I use 1 rare candy now before the rival, then I will level up after his final Pokemon, Lorelai's final Pokemon, Bruno's final Pokemon, Agatha's final Pokemon, and Lance's final Pokemon. And without using another rare candy, Wartortle will level up going into the champion's Cloyster. So the number to remember remember here is if you can go into the rival battle on Route 22 at level 53, you will level up at all of the key moments in the final battles to not lose badge boosts. Do remember this only applies with the medium slow growth rate, although I will have another number like this for slow growth rate Pokemon coming next week. Okay, for the late game, I'm going to show you the run summary for Wartortle so you can get a sense for how all of this comes together. As you can see, for Lorelei and then the remainder of the league, I am teaching Rest. This makes my moveset slightly constrained throughout this section of the game. I cannot give up Surf, it is mechanically impossible. I can't get rid of Withdraw because it's key for the champion, and Dig is really helpful throughout Bruno and Agatha. Plus, it's also very useful here against Lorelei because Surf doesn't do very much damage. I tried to rectify this frustration by using Mimic here in the place of Rest, keeping Mimic throughout the league, and then using Rest in Mimic's place. The issue of doing things this way is not immediately obvious, but Lorelei is just so much less consistent when you can't heal. It ended up being the case that after trying to mimic Amnesia a bunch to max out damage from Surf, and then losing to the Slowbro using Psychic, I decided that the best option was if I taught Mimic, I should then steal Rest from Dugong, and that just defeats the point of having Mimic earlier. The consequence of playing this way is that Lorelei just becomes really long. You have to use moves like Dig and Surf to knock out her Pokemon, which is just frustrating. Things can occasionally go wrong against the Lapras, but it's much less likely when you have Rest on your side. Believe me, I tried to make this fight faster, but you can't do it without significantly impacting consistency. From there, Lance is the next key moment. Use one rare candy prior to him. This pushes off the level up from the champion's Cloyster to the champion's Flareon. It's very key to maintain badge boosts into the Cloyster so that you don't have to knock it out over many turns with Surf. Blizzard for Lance in the place of Dig. Then I can use Mimic to steal Earthquake on the champion, set up with Withdraw on the Sandslash, and sweep the remainder of his Pokemon. Just so you're aware, with Withdraw, after setting up 6 times, I will have a 3-hit against the Cloyster using Surf. Without badge boosts, this jumps to either a 4-hit or a 5-hit, and you don't want to do that because if the Cloyster crits with Spike Cannon, it can do quite a bit of damage. Okay, so utilizing this strategy in my 4th playthrough, Wartortle clocks in with a time of 44 minutes and 19 seconds, with 4 resets at level 60. This is a game time of 2 hours and 50 minutes. As you can see, the game time is lower when compared with Charmeleon, so under ideal circumstances, Wartortle would be the superior solo running Pokemon. And even under non-ideal circumstances, like this run with 4 resets, it still gets a much better time. But what about Ivysaur? How far can Sleep Powder take it? I think of these middle evolution starters, Ivysaur is the simplest to figure out. That is, except for the early game. If it wants to stay competitive with Charmeleon and Wartortle's peak times, then it's going to need to save time in the early game. I have already clearly identified all of the reasons that this thing just doesn't have an advantage in this section of the game, and that is unfortunate for it, because once the early game is done, it gets Swords Dance and Sleep Powder and then crushes the remainder of the game, provided it gets good luck. I've got my fingers crossed that in the first 5 playthroughs, like with the other 2 Pokemon, I am going to be able to get a decent run with Ivysaur. There might be a world where I don't because Sleep Powder is just inaccurate and doesn't come through for me. Now let's get into the early game specifics. First of all, Ivysaur is going to be beating this section of the game on minimum battles, and that is not as simple as you might think it would be. There's only one mandatory battle after the rival in the lab before Brock. That is against this level 10 Caterpie, and Ivysaur is going to be level 6 with the moves Tackle, Growl, and Leech Seed. I have to show you the damage ranges because they are very important. The Bug Catcher's Caterpie has 2 moves, Tackle and String Shot. Tackle does between 4 to 5 damage with a regular hit and 6 to 8 with a critical hit. This means it is going to knock out Ivysaur somewhere between 4 and 9 turns. And that's pretty scary when you consider that Ivysaur is going to knock out the Caterpie in 7 to 10 turns. In this case, because critical hit damage is based on the Pokemon's level, Ivysaur will deal less damage whenever it gets a critical hit. So the maximum damage it can deal is actually lower than the Caterpie's maximum damage. I attempted this a bunch of different ways, trying to go with just Tackle, trying to use Leech Seed and Tackle, but eventually I found that the best option was using Growl turn 1, Leech Seed turn 2, and then Growl turn 3. After hitting the Caterpie with 2 Growls, its Tackles do between 2 and 3 damage every turn, making it unlikely to knock out Ivysaur before I get the KO, plus I'm gaining back 1 hit point every turn with Leech Seed. Then following Zealous Pawn's advice, I apply a similar strategy to Brock. His Geodude is by far the more scarier Pokemon. It has a higher attack stat and it's only going to use Tackle. First turn, lower its attack with Growl. Second turn, use Leech Seed so that you're dealing chip damage to it every turn and gaining back a little bit of health. Then follow up with 2 more Growls to minimize Geodude's damage. Just in case you're curious how we figure things like this out, I want to step through the process for all of you. So look here, this is the damage ranges. Ivysaur is going to 29 hit the Geodude, and Geodude is going to somewhere between 4 and 8 shot Ivysaur, with a decent likelihood of it being a 5 hit. Its initial damage with regular hits, we're going to be talking exclusively about regular hits here because critical hits will not change. Its damage with regular hits is between 5 to 7, but after a single Growl, it plummets to 4 to 5. Then after the second Growl, it goes down to 3 to 4, and after the third Growl, it falls to 2 to 3. If I use a 4th, 5th, or 6th Growl, its damage will not change, so that's why only 3 Growls. We're just going to be wasting time if we try to set up any more. Now, even with all of this planning, the fight can still go bad for Ivysaur. One way is if Geodude gets a critical hit. When this happens, in my experience, it is almost always going to be a loss, unless Geodude also misses a bunch of hits with Tackle. In that case, sometimes you can recover, but if the Geodude crits 2 times, you might as well just restart the playthrough and try again. I am never going to take a reset here on Brock. I'm trying to squeeze through this section of the game with tons of luck, and it doesn't make sense to just bloat the time taking a reset after trying to squeeze through the early game on this few battles. Luckily for Ivysaur, once it makes it to Onix, things get much easier. Leech Life recovers more than 1 HP per turn. If Onix chooses Bide, then I recover a ton of health for free, and if it goes for Bind, then I recover HP each turn this move hits. Also, while I'm gaining back health with Leech Seed, I can just spam Growl, lowering its damage from Tackle and Bind. Although, I do want to admit that sometimes Onix can still get Ivysaur because I'm slower than it. So it could set up with Screech, lower my defense, then hit really powerful binds over and over again and knock out my Grass type. But losing once you make it to the Onix and set up for 1 or 2 turns is pretty unlikely, as you can see here. Clearing Brock now means that Ivysaur has to go up against all the trainers I complained about at a lower level. People like Youngster Ben on Route 3 can be incredibly frustrating. In this case, Poison Sting deals a lot of damage. Both the Rattata and the Ekans can lower my defense stat, and then the Ekans can use Wrap to either waste time or to just troll me and sometimes knock Ivysaur out. I had multiple restarts to the entire playthrough right here. In that way, this Grass type feels somewhat similar to Parasect, another Grass type, although it takes 4 times damage from the Poison Stings, and in general, Youngster Ben is much scarier when using the bug. Now with this route, Ivysaur is not going to beat the game on minimum battles. Because there's some really fast experience on the Hikers team inside Mount Moon, I might as well take advantage of that. Plus, this extra training does help for Jesse and James at the end of the cave. This battle can sometimes sour because they have 2 poison types, and Meowth is good at lowering attack as well as doing massive damage with Bite. One piece of advice from Zealous Pawn is to use Leech Seed against the coughing, and I think you can also use Growl here if you don't want to take extra damage. I tend to play overly cautiously, so that's what I do here. Even though Ivysaur has decent health, I think I should have just attacked. Now, one thing I do want to mention, the coughing, it is better to attack them with Vine Whip. It does slightly more damage. In this case, I'm not doing that. It wouldn't speed up the battle that much. I do make some mistakes in these follow-up playthroughs. It's hard to play perfectly all the time. And you can see that principle being demonstrated here with the final ladder of the cave. Okay, Cerulean City, second optional trainer inside the gym. I'm going to fight the Swimmer right before Misty. One small detail I want to call out here is the fact that Vine Whip only has 10 PP, but that is perfect for this section of the game. Knocking out the Swimmer with 3 uses of Vine Whip and 1 use of Tackle if I fail to get the 1 hit on the Shelter, it is a roll. Then I have 2 Vine Whips left over to use on the Pecking Goldeen trainer, which 2 shots, and that leaves me with 5 for Misty, which is the perfect number. I need 2 for the Staryu and 3 for the Starmie. I'm not going to be saving for these battles. It just doesn't make sense. Also, I get a little bit of a speed boost here because I critical hit the Staryu. Now, experience from it levels Ivysaur up to 20. It doesn't look like it's going to level up to 21 after the Starmie, but this thing gives such good experience yields and my level is so low that Ivysaur just barely makes it to 21. Then before the rival, just to ensure that Ivysaur has a good time and a fast time on Nugget Bridge, I'm going to use 2 rare candies to level it up to 23 over the next damage rounding threshold. By Seismic Toss, I choose to fight the Hiker rather than the Junior trainer for a little bit more experience. Then on the SSN, Body Slam, but I'm going to skip Rest. Ivysaur does not need it, as mentioned before. Defeating Surge levels Ivysaur up to 29, and just barely. This is where Zealous Pawn uses one more rare candy to go up to level 30 to fight the Wrapping Lass. Over the damage rounding threshold, Body Slam has a 97.7% chance to one-hit the Oddish. If you're at level 29 instead, like I am here in the footage, I only have a 59.3% chance to one-hit both of the Oddish. It's a little bit inconvenient and it slows things down a tiny bit. The principle that Zealous Pawn is employing here is that as soon as he gets rare candies, he wants to use them to impact the playthrough in a way that speeds up the run. I simply forgot to use this rare candy. I was intending to do so, but it just didn't really stick in my mind. I sometimes did it like in my 4th and 3rd playthrough, but I forgot it here in my 5th playthrough. Okay, the mid-game's really straightforward. Pokemon Tower as soon as possible, then Sylph to get Swords Dance, fight the rival as soon as possible. Once that's done, go and take on Erica. This brings Ivysaur up to level 42 right before Koga. But I'm going to go one step further because we saw the disadvantages that Ivysaur has there before when it didn't have Sleep Powder. So Zealous Pawn figured out that we can use 4 rare candies prior to Koga, bringing it up to 46 to get Sleep Powder before the Bug-type Specialist. By the way, doing the whole game one level lower after my mistake at the Wrapping Lass doesn't change anything because I have 5 rare candies now. Although I do sacrifice what looks like part of a level, it would have worked out this way anyways. It's the same number of battles. I just had a small handicap in the prior section of the game whereas Zealous Pawn wouldn't have. So using 5 candies, I can go to 46 and then fight Koga with Sleep Powder. Put the first Venonat to sleep, then spam Swords Dance. After that, use Body Slam to knock out all of his Pokemon. There is a little bit of optional training against Psych in the next section of the game, just to line up all of my levels in the late game. After only this battle, then Ivysaur takes on Blaine. This fight is straightforward in concept. I have to rely on Sleep Powder and the speed boost with Swords Dance in order to win. The fact that I'm starting the fight at level 47 means that I won't lose my boosts before defeating all of his Pokemon. One thing to note here is that you cannot one-shot the Arcanine with a hit from Body Slam even with +6 in attack. So I need to put it to sleep with Sleep Powder to avoid getting hit. If Ivysaur misses, then it's probably going to lose, provided the Arcanine doesn't go for Reflect. But if you hit 2 Sleep Powders, then Ivysaur will likely win. Sabrina's next. Check out my Ivysaur's speed. I used 2 Carbos in the department store earlier in the playthrough to ensure that I would have 105 speed during this fight to move first against the Abra. Then I can put it to sleep with Sleep Powder, set up with Swords Dance, badge boost my speed. At only 2 Swords Dances, it's 132, which is 1 speed too low to move first against the Alakazam. But after the 3rd Swords Dance, then I have 148 and I can move first against her Ace and one-shot. Inside the Viridian City Gym, I fight one optional trainer, this guy right at the beginning. He's very fast for Ivysaur because I still have Razor Leaf, so I one-shot both of his ground-type Pokemon. Now, Giovanni is a bit annoying. The Dugtrio can cause problems like Sand Attack, as happens here. Although, once the Dugtrio and the Persian Feint, then it's essentially free for Ivysaur, provided it doesn't miss on the ride-on. Even after taking a Sand Attack, I'm still able to pull through in this battle. For Rival 6, I was on my own. I didn't have detailed notes from Zealous Pawn regarding this fight. I figured out that Ivysaur is going to level up after knocking out the Sand Slash, so I want to set up only twice here. Then I want to save 1 Swords Dance so I can use it later in the fight to ensure that I move first against the Kadabra. By doing this, the rival is pretty straightforward. Now, as I've said before, this can all fall apart. There's potential for resets in most of these battles, but Ivysaur does have a really competent solution. So it doesn't make sense from a time perspective to train up to a higher level because we would still be doing the same thing, Sleep Powder, Swords Dance, and then spamming Body Slam with occasional Razor Leafs. Now defeating the rival brought me to level 52, and then before Lorelei I can use 2 rare candies to go up to level 54. With the medium slow growth rate, starting Lorelei at exactly level 54 ensures that Ivysaur levels up after every final Pokemon during the league and then after the champion's Cloyster. There is not much to say over this section of the game. Defeat Lorelei, defeat Bruno, move on to Agatha, here teach Mimic in the place of Razor Leaf, Mimic Lick, set up with Swords Dance, sweep her team. For Lance, I get my first reset here because I'm using Sleep Powder on the second Dragonair in order to mimic Ice Beam. If I miss, Ivysaur is probably going to lose, especially if it's had a bad matchup against the Gyarados and taken damage earlier into the fight. Although with Ice Beam, I have enough speed to move first against the Aerodactyl, and from there, Lance is really easy. For the champion, Mimic Earthquake as I did before, set up with Swords Dance, and the only 2 Pokemon Pokemon you need to use Sleep Powder for in this battle are the Sandslash and the Cloyster. Now, it's not technically required against the Sandslash because it's just going to use Poison Sting, but from my experience, I found that it doing chip damage with Poison Sting every turn does accumulate and make it slightly less likely for Ivysaur to win in a bad scenario later into the fight. So I'm trying to use this Sleep Powder not because it's absolutely required, but just to make the odds a little bit better later into the fight should I get there. And speaking of the Cloyster, this time I miss with Sleep Powder and hits me with Ice Beam, so Ivysaur faints, getting a second reset here. But on my second run it goes to sleep, I knock it out, move on to the Flareon, use Earthquake, and that's that. So Ivysaur, in its 5th playthrough, gets a time of 45 minutes and 25 seconds, with 2 resets at level 59, with a game time of 2 hours and 54 minutes. Okay, that's the final playthrough for this video. Now we can sit back and look at how all of this data stacks up. Let's start by declaring the winner. Wartortle was the fastest of the mid-stage Pokemon. Ivysaur was in 2nd place, and Charmeleon a distant 3rd. That said, we should also look at Zealous Pawn's results because they're much better than mine. He got a time of 43 minutes and 4 seconds with 2 resets using Charmeleon. His Wartortle result was only marginally faster, 42 minutes and 24 seconds, although he does admit that he thinks this Pokemon still can go faster. For Ivysaur, he had a very comparable result of 42 minutes and 32 seconds, but in the end, his results also stack up the way that mine do. Wartortle in 1st place, Ivysaur in 2nd place, and Charmeleon in a distant 3rd. By the way, hopefully when Daily December is over for me, I'm going to be able to sit down with Zealous Pawn and learn from him, because I think I can still improve my play a lot after seeing our results compared side by side. Okay, let's go through each Pokemon one by one. For Ivysaur, here's the 5 playthroughs I completed with it. Over the course of the runs, the times trended down with one exception, with run 3 being slightly slower than run 2. With Charmeleon, in the same amount of time, I only ended up completing 4 playthroughs because it is more inconsistent. In this case, the 3rd and 4th playthrough are incredibly close, although the 2nd playthrough was slower than my 1st run. With Wartortle, things are also kind of messy. From best to worst, 4th playthrough, 2nd playthrough, 5th playthrough, 3rd playthrough, and 1st playthrough. Now, some of the changes between all of these results are that I'm figuring things out as I go. As I learn, then the routes become a little bit more consistent. This is what it looks like when we stack up their best results together. Now, I talked a lot about how Charmeleon is fast in the early game, but when you look at things this way, it actually appears that Wartortle is slightly faster in the early stages of the game. Throughout the mid-game, Charmeleon makes slightly faster progress until the later stages of the gym challenge where Wartortle pulls back the advantage, and then it just beats the league faster because, you know, Lance exists. I'm sorry, Charmeleon and Fire-type fans. And in case you really like data and you want to see how all of these results stack up together, we put this graph together. I know the labels are colliding with each other on the left-hand side of the screen. We're going to look into this. This is an automated program, so I cannot go in and edit this in a software like Photoshop. Anyways, I thought this is kind of a fun demonstration of just how much work went into the playing section of this video. Okay, we have reached that point in the video. It is time to rank these 3 Pokemon in the tier list. With the worst results overall today, Charmeleon gets itself the 3rd spot in the C tier, behind Ghastly and Kangaskhan. One thing that's interesting about this, at least as things stand right now, is that Charmeleon is behind 3 other fire types. Arcanine, which I recently re-ranked, getting a time of 46 minutes and 8 seconds. Ninetales, which I have yet to re-rank. It has a time of 46 minutes and 56 seconds, although it will move up in the rankings when I finally get around to replaying it. And so will Flareon with its current time of 46 minutes and 59 seconds. Now, depending on what the differences are between Zealous Pawn and my setups, maybe there's some discrepancies there with why his times are so much lower than mine. I don't know yet, we haven't looked into it, but I assume that it's mostly how we're playing. And if that's the case, then Charmeleon might end up being the best of these fire types. And if that is the case, then it would be the top ranked fire type in the entire tier list. So if you are a Fire-type fan and you feel really cheated by what's happened with Charmeleon today, don't worry, Charizard still has to be played. In second place, we have Ivysaur, so it earns itself a place in the B tier. It's ahead of Mr. Mime's 45-49 time, and behind Golem's 45-17 time. I don't find it particularly surprising that Ivysaur is higher up in the tier list. After all, clustered near the top are a bunch of Pokemon that get access to sleep-inducing moves. Victreebel, Hypno, Gengar, Vileplume, which I will have to re-rank at some point, and it's going to jump up in the rankings when that happens. Also Haunter at the end of the A tier. That said, overall these starters are fairly well balanced with each other. Wartortle wasn't outrageously better. It also earns itself a spot in the B tier, behind Tentacruel ahead of Persian. Okay, so there we are, 3 steps closer to the final goal of ranking all 151 Pokemon in this tier list. Currently we have ranked 108 Pokemon, and next week we are going to continue ranking more. Thank you for supporting this channel on YouTube through memberships or on Patreon. Now let's get back to the video because I once again forgot to record voiceover and footage for the Oak battles. Alright, I just played these and they did not go well. It took me over an hour to film all 3 Oak battles. This might be the trio of Pokemon that has had the most difficulty beating Oak. Generally, he's not very difficult. If you didn't know, this is an unused battle that is on all of the ROMs from Generation 1, but it was just never implemented into the game. As a result, his movesets are not upgraded from Red and Blue into Yellow version, meaning all of his Pokemon just have the default moves that they would know at their given levels. This results in some bad sets. Tauros has Tail Whip, Leer, Rage, and Takedown. Executor has Barrage, Hypnosis, and Stomp. No 4th move for it. Arcanine has Roar, Ember, Leer, and Takedown. Blastoise has Bite, Withdraw, Skull Bash, and Hydro Pump. And Gyarados has Dragon Rage, Leer, Hydro Pump, and Hyper Beam. It's essentially the same Gyarados that Lance has, just in this case it's level 70. And that is really unfortunate for Charmeleon, which was the Pokemon I played first against Oak. For all 3 of these, I am going to be going up against the team that Oak has that will be the strongest against the Pokemon I am using. So in this case, he has 2 water types, Blastoise and Gyarados. I deeply regret making this choice now that I finished the filming for this section. Anyway, what I have to do here is set up with Swords Dance and then use Body Slam to knock out pretty much all of his Pokemon. But the damage ranges are not good. I can't one-shot the Tauros, I can't one-shot the Executor with either Body Slam or Fire Blast. I have to 2-hit the Arcanine, 2-hit the Blastoise, and 2-hit the Gyarados. I have to 2-hit everything. This of course exposes Charmeleon to some problems, like the fact that Blastoise and the Gyarados can both use Hydro Pump. So what is my path to victory? The path to victory is Blastoise has to choose Withdraw or miss with Hydro Pump, and then Gyarados has to miss with Hydro Pump. I reset here to Oak with Charmeleon 14 times, before finally I came through with the luck I needed to defeat him. As we're watching the successful fight, I want to mention something about my methodology for this battle. I never consider this in the rankings with Pokemon, I just do this fight for fun and a little bit of extra content for all of you. I had thought once of using it as tiebreakers, but we haven't had any ties where that would be relevant. And in general, this battle is so boring, I have even thought of cutting it in the past. I guess I'm glad, because I got to waste my time, and I guess I did have 3 interesting battles against Oak. One thing about my methodology is, since I'm treating it this way, I'm not leveling up or trying to optimize my strategy. I essentially require the Pokemon to defeat the league, and then immediately fight Oak. They don't get to level up, they don't get to learn new moves. This causes experience routing problems, so that the Pokemon levels up in the middle of the Oak battle where it loses its badge boosts. This is relevant for Charmeleon, as you can see, because it loses its badge boosts right after the Arcanine before the Blastoise. As a result, it is not able to survive a Hydro Pump from either of his final 2 Pokemon, even when it's at full health. So it requires Withdraw or misses. And that's how I win. Okay, Wartortle. This one levels up in the middle of the battle in an unfortunate way. It loses its badge boosts from Withdraw, and so it has +6 defense, but that doesn't help against the Venusaur. This is the Pokemon that has the 2nd best moveset of Oak's teams. It has Razor Leaf, Growth, Sleep Powder, and Solar Beam. In this case, Wartortle really has a significant problem during this fight. The only damage-dealing move I currently have is Surf, and because Oak's movesets are so terrible, what can I steal with Mimic? This isn't like the Champion where I can grab Earthquake. I'll show some extra B-roll from the other fights here. I played around with mimicking Ember from the Arcanine. This doesn't do enough damage to the Venusaur and I just get hit by Sleep Powder anyways. I tried using Hypnosis from the Executor to put the Venusaur to sleep, but this is not a good choice either because then I don't have enough PP using Surf. In the end, what I had to do was mimic Stomp from the Executor and then use this to flinch the Venusaur over and over again in order for it to not use Solar Beam, Sleep Powder, or Razor Leaf. I do want you to pay attention to this. Stomp gets a critical hit flinch on the first turn, a critical hit flinch on the second turn, then it flinches on the third turn, it flinches on the fourth turn, and finally I knock out the Venusaur over 5 turns. This was incredible luck, and with it, I'm able to move on to the Gyarados and finish it off slowly using Surf. Because Stomp ran out of PP, I don't have any other choices. With Wartortle, Oak was a little bit easier. It took me 7 resets before I finally got my winning attempt. Now, I saved Ivysaur for last. I thought it was going to be the easiest. In this case, I was wrong. Wartortle ended up winning just slightly faster. With Ivysaur, I had a total of 9 resets before I finally got the winning attempt. The reason here is exclusively because of Sleep Powder. I just kept missing on the Charizard and getting obliterated by Flamethrower. Also, Ivysaur starts this fight at a lower level, so it levels up after the Executor, and then I can put the Arcanine to sleep and badge boost myself with Swords Dance here so that I move first against the Charizard. Really, Sleep Powder just needs to hit against the Fire-type starter. When that happens, I can use Body Slam, knock it out over 2 turns, move on to the Gyarados. I use Sleep Powder to avoid Hyper Beam's critical hits. Once it's asleep, I can use Body Slam, finish it off, and with that, Oak is defeated. Anyways, that was a bit rough, and this video is so much longer than I originally thought it would be. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.